Well, let us know if the audio has issues.
Okay, we are going to start this episode of the Ramsey Dewey podcast with Xiao, and let me log on so I can check to see if I can be heard, and if Xiao can be heard. Hold on, looks like the audio is cutting out. Oh, just a second. I might have another issue here. Okay. I think I got that clipped in the...
Well, let us know if the audio has issues.
Okay. All right, looks like the audio is working fine from my end, but hello, YouTube audience. We're doing a live podcast. This is not an episode of Q&A with the coach. We might take some questions from the viewers later on. So I know some people like to send in super chats on the live Q&As and say, hey, Ramsey, answer my question. This is a podcast with our friend Liu Xiao. He's been on the channel a bunch of times. You can hear loud and clear. Excellent, because we did a bunch of sound checks beforehand because the last two live broadcasts, we've had some issues with the volume, with the sound, with static in the background. So that's fantastic that you can hear us. So once again, this is an episode of the Ramsey Dewey podcast. We're here with Xiao. You might recognize him from some of the technique videos. We've done some podcasts with him before. And yeah, Xiao, how are you doing today?
I'm doing alright. You might recognize me from the time I wheel kicked the dude across the cage. What number of the podcast is it this time?
I've lost track. I think when we got to podcast number
40-something?
13, and this was like 6 years ago, my friend Antonio, he was being interviewed that day, and he was a little superstitious about the number 13, and he's like, hey, can we just call it number 14? I was like, sure, it's podcast number 14. And after that, I've lost count, so I don't know what the actual number we're up to is now, so I'm just going to stop numbering them and call it the Ramsey Dewey podcast with Xiao.
My
So here
first
we go.
appearance on the podcast was number 33, I recall.
All right, so we're past 33 at this point.
This would be my 6th appearance on your podcast. Some of them were pretty brief.
Yeah, some of them were pretty brief. We did a lot of the podcasts at the gym, fairly impromptu with no audio equipment at all, so the audio was kind of meh, dog audio. But we had some important lessons to be learned there, and perhaps the most important lesson of all was the time that Xiao did an entire 2-hour podcast with a shin guard on top of his head balanced there. It got hundreds of comments. Nobody ever once mentioned the shin guard on his head.
They aren't surprised.
So what's even more interesting about that podcast, you're balancing a shin guard on your head. We got into some pretty deep discussions about life and philosophy and whatnot, and you never broke character. Not even a little bit.
I don't mind it being on my head. Speaking of life and philosophy, I find that, first of all, I'm not satisfied with my speaking on your podcasts in the past. But I find that when I speak to you, in general, my speaking tends to be not as good as usual. I think it's because when I'm talking to you, I'm pondering how I really think and feel and exploring new ideas. And when I talk to other people, I tend to not do that as much. Well, it's also for my shortcomings in speaking ability. I will try to do better this time.
Yeah, that's interesting, because most people, I would say, myself included, we go out in the world and just interact with random people, and we're pretty closed into our identity. You know, this is who I am, this is how I think, this is what I believe, and some random guy isn't going to change that, but...
You are not some random guy. You're the coach that took me seriously when I walked into the EFL gym, what's called the UFL gym 2 years ago, wasn't it?
Man, Xiao hit me right in the feels, man. Right in the feels.
A lot of coaches I've encountered at that point thought I'm a clown. Well, kind of bad. Can't blame them.
No, I take everybody seriously. Anybody who...
Of smoking weed and driving dangerously fast on mountain passes. But when the time actually comes to go and do that, I don't know how I feel about it, man. lot has happened in China
Hmm?
since we last did a podcast after
Yeah.
my fight at Punch Cage. Shanghai got locked down and
Oh man.
some draconian stuff happened in this country. It's scary. I think if Shanghai didn't get locked down, I might have stayed in China for another year or two to train and fight with you and other people. But man, now I feel I I at least have to make a run for a better life, and and if I settle down in America, maybe I can help my friends in the future.
Yeah. Well, what part of the States are you going to?
I'm going to Los Angeles.
Ah, that's where my wife is from. Spent a lot of time there. Los Angeles. Shout out to the peeps in LA.
Yeah. Maybe you can recommend some good gyms that I could check out once I get there.
Sure, man. There are a ton of great gyms in Los Angeles. I mean, if you want to train jiu-jitsu, boxing, MMA, etc., I mean, they got it, man. They got it. I could recommend a lot of good gyms. Gyms I've personally been to, gyms I've heard about. I mean, man, name the way you want to train. You'll be able to find a combat sports gym in Los Angeles.
Yeah, California is a hotbed of fighting.
There's where was it? I was driving through, I think it was Irvine, California, and I noticed something really weird. I'm looking out the windows and there's like a karate school. There's like a dojo, a karate specifically on every other block. I'm like, is it just me or are there karate schools everywhere in this town? Like more karate schools than I've ever seen before. But LA, Los Angeles proper, yeah, you're going to find a lot of combat sports gyms.
I've been at 3 gyms in LA. The first one very briefly. Mm, so I would just count the second two.
Hmm.
One of them is a well-established Muay Thai gym, Sitiaton, LA. It's a great gym that produced many great fighters, but it seems that the coach is just not happy with the way I kickbox and
Hmm.
kind of just dismisses me and don't want to teach me. And another gym it might not even exist anymore after COVID. Last I heard, it's
Yeah.
closed down. Um, Marino Muay Thai Academy used to be the the Central LA branch of Legends MMA.
Hmm.
Uh, since it's a fairly new gym with inexperienced coaches, they have the best intentions, but it seems that my way of sparring and fighting is so confusing to them. They don't have a lot of inputs to make.
Yeah, we talked about this before. Basically, you would if you haven't seen Xiao spar, he spars and he fights a little bit like Bruce Lee. If you can't tell from the rash guard he's wearing right here. Um, he has his power side forward. He adopts kind of a side stance. Uses a lot of taekwondo, karate style kicks. And if you are that type of guy and you step into a typical Muay Thai gym, a lot of them are going to tell you you're doing everything wrong. Square up more. Put your power foot in the back. Put your power hand in the back. Do what we do. And what you're doing is absolute nonsense. But, and this is a very important but, there's more than one way to fight, especially as far as striking goes. So, yeah, Xiao came into my gym fighting like this, sparring like this, and explaining to me, hey, they told me don't do that, do what we do, be a carbon copy of, the basic Muay Thai fighter, and I'm not interested in doing that. And I was like, all right, fine. Because MMA is not Muay Thai. It's not. And because of the nature of the sport, it affords you the opportunity to fight in a bunch of different ways. In the sport of Muay Thai, that's a different story. But in the sport of mixed martial arts, way different.
A cage is bigger than a ring. Also, a sideways stance affords more mobility, which helps with defending takedowns. Switching stances too is huge for defending takedowns. However, I'm not against the Muay Thai style. I've been filling in the holes of um, of my shortcomings in the way I fight. But if I try to fight in the so-called traditional way, I'll just be less effective. It's
Hmm.
what I have to work with right now.
Yeah. So let's talk about the Shanghai lockdown. We talked about this in the last podcast. If anybody doesn't know yet, the Shanghai lockdown is, I hesitate to say over. I mean, we're not locked in our apartments anymore, most of us. I mean, there are still a few people out there in the city who may be in that situation. But for the most part, most people are free to come and go, etc. But everybody still has to take regular COVID tests, and if anyone tests positive, woe betide them.
Off to the concentration camp you go.
Yeah, in my particular situation at my apartment complex, I just moved to a new apartment, but at my old apartment complex, this was just a week, 2 weeks ago, they locked us down again, and it was because a guy who didn't even have COVID, but he visited a karaoke bar, like a KTV, they call them here in Shanghai. He visited a KTV, did some singing at night, and somebody at this KTV tested positive.
Right.
He didn't. Again, they're testing everybody every day. He came and visited some friends of his who lived at my apartment complex, my old apartment, and had dinner with them and then left. And since they track everybody and they track who everybody is with, they were like, this guy was at the karaoke bar where there was a COVID case, so we have to contain this. We are going to lock down everybody who had a potential contact with him, meaning everybody in my apartment complex, everybody was locked down again for 9 additional days. So,
A minor segue, Ramsey.
yeah,
Could you turn down the air conditioning slightly, please?
we can do that. Hold on just a moment. Xiao, keep talking.
The lockdown has been a depressing time for people who lived in Shanghai. Just about all businesses ceased functioning. That includes combat sports gyms. I was talking to some fighters from Animal MMA. It seems that China's top elite fighters are all training and fighting in the US now or in the process of going there.
Either the U.S. or other countries. Like I've got a friend who's in, where is he? Somewhere in Eastern Europe. But yeah, he's one of China's top prospects. Yeah, I just turned it off. If you want to turn it back on, you can.
Yeah, I would just make it
Anyway, one of
slightly
China's
less.
top prospects. But yeah, he's out in Eastern Europe, and then we've got
We're talking
what's
about Liu Kai.
yeah, Liu Kai, and then what's his name? Blanking on the name. He's training over where is it? The American Kickboxing Academy. Anyway,
Song Yadong.
yes,
He's not
yes.
training at AKA. He's
Oh
training
no.
at Team Alpha Male.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, he's kind of a star there nowadays. I saw him make an appearance at a UFC event with Uriah Faber and I believe it was Cody Garbrandt. Well, with him beating Henan Barao, well, it was, actually no, I'm sorry, Marlon Moraes
Okay.
in such a convincing fashion, his stock is bound to rise. I
Hmm.
really admire Song Yadong because it must not be easy for a he's obviously a very bright young man, but his English ability might be limited, and it's hard to go to the States alone to
Yeah.
train and fight. And Team Alpha Male is a very competitive gym too.
Oh yeah.
Uh, TJ Dillashaw split with the
Does he
gym.
speak English at all?
He
Okay.
does, but it's limited.
Yeah.
He tries his best though, and he's come a long
There,
way.
there aren't a lot of Mandarin-speaking enclaves in that part of America, as far as I know. So
It's Northern California, so I would assume there is. It depends on the part of Northern California too. I'm more familiar with Southern California, but it doesn't matter. He's training at Team Alpha Male. That's
yeah.
most of his life, and there are not many Chinese fighters at Team Alpha Male.
Hmm.
But he went there because it's the best gym for his weight class, arguably the best gym for his weight class in the
Okay,
world.
that makes sense. Yeah, that's an interesting point you bring up. A gym for your weight class. It's interesting. Nobody's ever really asked me that question. Like, what's the people always ask me like, what's the best style for my weight class? But a gym for your weight class, that actually makes a lot of sense
Mm-hmm.
because certain gyms tend to attract a certain size of athlete or a certain height. I notice at certain times in the gyms I've worked at, when you get a couple of good athletes, more guys that size will show up. So if you
Oh
have
yeah.
at one point, like everybody was like a good welterweight over at the JX Fight Club, and they were all like
Mm.
Russian. It was just these tough Russian welterweights, and if you were smaller than that, you'd probably have a hard time. If you were bigger than that, you'd be okay. If you were a welterweight, that was a great place to train back then. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I notice a lot of big guys, like heavyweights, have a hard time finding a good gym.
Oh yeah. Remember when Jock was at EFL?
Yeah, yeah, and Jacques, man, he could be a heavyweight. Like when he grows up, he could definitely be a
Oh
legit
yeah.
heavyweight. But right now, I think he could even compete lower than that if he wanted to.
Welterweight,
Oh yeah,
maybe.
yeah. He's a big boy, but man,
It's hard to tell exactly how big he is because he wears loose clothing. But he is on his way to being big. Well, he's pretty tall. He's like 6'4", if not 6'5". Uh, he has great agility for his size too. It's question mark kicking me in the face.
yeah. I remember this one time. There was this big dude came to my gym over at the JX Fight Club, and
Hmm.
again, it was mostly like welterweight sized guys. And afterwards, he said, I really like your gym and I like the way you coach, but I need some sparring partners my
Right,
size.
right.
I was like,
Makes
yeah,
sense.
okay. And so I pointed him in the direction of a friend of mine who had like 5 or 6 big dudes over at his gym, and he went over there and had a great time.
Hmm.
So, yeah, there are definitely certain sizes that tend to gravitate towards certain gyms. Nobody ever talks about that, and I never really thought about that until you brought that up. Fascinating.
Hmm. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
So Team Alpha Male is basically the best of the little guys.
It's arguably, yeah, or so I've heard. I don't know much about the subject matter. Well, speaking of people at gyms, the the crew of 2021 at EFL has really dispersed.
Hmm.
It's it's an emotional subject for me.
Well, yeah, you could say that about the entirety of the city of Shanghai right now. Like,
But
a lot of people have made a mass exodus
it's
after
easy
the
to
lockdown.
it's easy to blame it on that, but I don't think that was the case.
Hmm.
Before the gym started closing down mid March 2022, the EFL crew has started dispersing, especially for the striking and MMA classes.
Hmm.
Jock went to Animal MMA briefly. He actually invited me to go.
Is Jacques still in Shanghai?
No, he's in
Hmm.
Europe right now. He's coming back to finish high school though. So that's how I met Kyle and the crew at Animal. Because Jock invited me to go along. Um, Tom Chorus, Jock's older brother, was
Yeah.
training at Modern Jiu Jitsu, so I signed up for a membership there. Well, as soon as I signed up, the city went into lockdown, and by the time we were released, Tom has gone to Europe for college. All the best to him.
Ah. Oh, Tom is older than Jacques. I didn't know that.
Yeah, he is older. She has gone to Europe to keep his permanent residency in Finland.
The audience is probably wondering who are these people they're talking about?
These are the people um, that were with me when I went from 0 to 1 as a fighter. Well, obviously you were there too. You were
Yeah. So
arguably
basically,
the
these are like your favorite training partners.
yeah. They will always have a special place in my heart.
Yeah.
And since I'm leaving tomorrow, I feel like talking about them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny how you train long enough, you start to get favorite training partners, and Yeah, I definitely have some. Like, take for example Jordan Chow, my good friend. He's been on the
Mm.
podcast before. You know, he appears as the knife wielding maniac. He's one of my favorite training partners, especially as far as submission grappling goes, man.
Mm.
And I'll tell you why, because he knows my game. I know a lot of guys who are technically better than Jordan, but Jordan gives me one of the hardest roles that I can experience because he knows my game so well, and we trained together for so long, for all of these years. And so there are technically better grapplers I can catch with my tricks. I can't catch Jordan with my tricks anymore.
Mm.
I've got to catch him by essentially outsmarting him. I've got to catch him by being a superior athlete. I've got to catch him by pushing myself in in yeah, just by pushing myself in a to be better, to put it simply.
I've had the same experiences. Milk Tea and Chi aren't the greatest strikers, but they tend to give me a hard time because they've seen me
Yeah, because
move
they
so
know
many
you.
times. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, they know you, man. So there are pros and cons about sparring with people who know you because it can give you some funny ideas. If you only spar with the same group of guys over and over again, you might start to either A, get really comfortable thinking, yeah, I'm the big fish in the small pond, and I'm the best guy out there, and then you go spar with some two-stripe white belt from some other gym, and he mops the floor with you, and you're like, but I thought I was good, just because you haven't had a contrast in styles. Or, again, they get to know your game intimately, and they can counter everything you throw at them, and so you might get an artificial sense of I'm not that good when you really are. So it can go both ways.
Oh, well, being good. Good is always relative.
Hmm.
Well, every fighter's psyche works differently. I don't know if I'm that motivated by being good. It would seem that my fighter's ego, so to speak, isn't strong enough, and that might be a problem.
Hmm.
That might stop me from progressing forward. Well, back before the lockdown, I I took a fight with Animal FC. I was going to fight Kyle Etheridge from Animal MMA, the gym.
Yeah, which is
Mm,
kind of funny because you guys both train at that same gym.
well, when I took the fight, I didn't train at that gym.
Oh, you hadn't started training at Animal yet.
No,
Okay,
that was
okay.
the time I went to Animal with Leah on a Saturday, and after that day, I decided I have to do what's best for my development as a fighter moving forward, and train at Animal. But I was at the time I decided to skip the evening classes because Kyle Etheridge would be training there. Well,
You didn't want to see your opponent give him the opportunity to scope you out and be like, oh, I know all your moves now.
also I didn't want to develop a relationship with him, and then fighting him it would be weird. Well, anyhow,
Yeah.
that's a sidetracking the subject.
No, that's a good point, though. It is weird. If you get to know a guy, if you become friends with a guy, then you're supposed to fight that guy. It's super weird.
Well, anyhow, the point is I took an MMA fight, but I knew that I wasn't. I it was doubtful over whether or not I would be ready. Kyle Etheridge has wrestled in high school, and it's very likely that he's going to take me down and punch my face. Um, I took the fight not to prove that I am good or better, but because at the time, the EFL 2021 crew has been disbanding, and I thought that if I take an MMA fight and get myself killed, at least my friends would come out and watch.
Hmm. Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I was also having a crush on Leah at the time. Well, I'm still having a crush on her.
Oh, man.
Um,
Does she know? Does she watch this podcast?
well, if she watches, she knows, but she already knows.
Oh, man.
We
Xiao has just declared his love live on the internet. My goodness.
never put it out in the open. Well, Leah is she competed on the same event as I did
Yeah, she
on
did a
November the
jiu-jitsu match.
20th at Punch Cage. She was the third fixture and I was the fourth.
Yeah, you did a kickboxing match. Leah did a BJJ match.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah.
it's impressive. When I was at her stage in my martial arts journey, I wouldn't have felt comfortable competing. The the girl she competed against is a blue belt now, and she more than held her own. Well, where was I going with this? Well, yeah, I took the MMA fight to
Were you trying to impress a girl, Xiao?
sort of, but I wheel kicked the dude across the cage, and that wasn't enough to win her
Yeah.
affection. So I don't think that's the issue, Ramsey.
Yeah, it was a great finish to the fight. You did that spinning hook kick. You knocked him down. It was yeah, great way to finish the fight, man. But if that doesn't impress the ladies, what will? Well, I got to tell you something about the ladies, Xiao. Most of them, I don't know. They're just not as interested in spinning hook kicks as we are, man. Take my wife, for example. I don't think she cares about spinning hook kicks at all. I think they're some of the coolest things in the world. Her, not so much.
Depends on the lady. Well, Leo was always more into the BJJ.
You should have strangled the fool, man. I know it was a kickboxing match, but the things we do to try to impress the ladies.
That and well, the 2021 crew of EFL was important to me because it was like a turning point in my life. Well, I was already 26 years old when this chapter happened. My early 20s were kind of screwed up. I was attending university at the University of Southern California. Some grad students who worked in the dormitories messed with me by making petty complaints to the whatever department at the university. So I was drinking with my friend in the dorm. I was 21 years old, but my friend was not. And these residential advisors knocked on the door and asked us to turn down the TV. They spotted the drinks and tried to take our IDs. I asked my friend to run away, and the advisors got really pissed and they called the police on me. The police were dumbfounded because I did nothing wrong, but they complained to some disciplinary department within the university that doesn't have to follow the law.
Was it some sort of infraction of the university code of conduct or something?
Actually, no, but they made some vague complaint that I made them feel unsafe in the community, and I lost my my right to live in the dormitory in the 2 months I was awaiting a meeting with the disciplinary department. But no wrongdoing was found on my part. But I went homeless for 2 months. That and the fact that my ex-girlfriend just cheated on me at the time. Also, that was my first love. She
That's hard to come back from.
Cheryl would always have a special place in my heart, but screw her too. Well, that was a tough time for me, and I think it made me that and the fact. Well, I was always getting in trouble with authorities, especially those at the school while I was growing up. And guess what? My parents always took the side of the school. Xiao, why are you being a worthless piece of shit again? Go kill yourself. So
Like they said that to you?
oh yeah, at one point, my dad said if I wasn't going to get into the Haihua elementary school when my family moved to Shanghai, he would take me with him to commit double suicide via jumping off a tall building.
Is this like some sort of Chinese saying that I'm
No,
not
no,
familiar
no,
with,
no,
or
no.
is he
It's-
just not a good dude?
It's a pretty messed up thing to say, even by
Okay.
Chinese parent standards.
Wow.
Well, back to my university days. So my parents were not supportive. Xiao, why are you being a piece of shit in college again? So I also at the time I started smoking weed, and I was having a mental breakdown because, well, my ex girlfriend, who I I depended on heavily, and I was homeless. So I thought, man, I should do something to make sure I'm never put in this spot again. So
Mm-hmm.
my solution was to invest my happiness in things that I have control over,
Hmm.
which translated to smoking weed and driving dangerously fast on mountain roads.
That's a way different direction than I would have taken it in.
Well, in but arguably from 2016, when I went into that phase of my life, to 2020, when I was failing miserably in university and returned to China as a result. Those are arguably the best years of my life.
Hmm.
Like sometimes it was depressing and lonely, but like I also had control over how I was feeling. It doesn't get that bad, no matter how bad it gets. The worst the worst prospect that could happen is that I would fail too much in university, and my parents wouldn't fund my university studies anymore, and I have to return to China. That's the worst prospect. But also the counselors and psychologists at my school gave me a diagnosis and certified that I I was within my rights to go on medical leave of absence for 3 semesters.
Hmm.
Well, that's the maximum amount an international student could do. So there's not much my parents could do because their philosophy is the authorities are always right.
Yeah, that's a very Chinese way of thinking.
Oh, I sidetracked this way far.
Yeah, that's
So
okay.
why the 2021 EFL crew was important to me? I returned to China in 2020 thinking all I want to do is for my immigration situation to be figured out, and then I can return to the States and come
Yeah, I remember you talking about
continue
this a lot.
continue my life of nihilistic hedonism. But I was not my my ability to get things done on a daily basis, to just wake up from my bed and live my life a little, was abysmally low. That was until I took a fight impulsively in May 2021. I was way overweight. I was over
Was
170
this that
pounds.
first punch cage fight?
Yeah, first punch cage fight.
Okay.
I was over 170 pounds. I'm 150 pounds. I'm really a bantamweight by UFC standards, really. So that was pretty fat for me. That was the fattest I've ever been in my life. In
Yeah.
3 weeks, I cut down to around 155 ish. Didn't have to weigh in for the fight, which is good. But I didn't want to look fat when I step into the cage.
That's a great
Um,
motivator.
it's a great
It, it,
motivator.
it sounds very selfish and very vain, but it's a great motivator. If you know you are going to step into a cage and you might get beaten up, at the very least, you want to look good while you do it.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. And I won the fight pretty handily, but that was not the important part. I felt loved and accepted at the EFL gym. I thought I don't care if it's the best gym in the world. I might never leave. That was how I felt at the time. Um, well, I have some. Well, not all of my training partners who I valued at the time are still super valuable to me now.
Hmm.
And some of them I remain good friends with, but there are a few persons that will always hold a special place in my heart.
Yeah. But a lot of people move on to other places, man. How long have I lived in Shanghai? Since 2009. And before I moved here, I had a gym back in the U.S. It was my first gym. I had a small crew of fighters that I was training there. We trained every day for like 4 hours. We got stuff done. We won some fights. It was great. I loved it, and it was a great crew to hang out with. And the most painful thing about leaving the U.S. was leaving that gym and leaving those training partners behind. And when I
Okay.
first came here to Shanghai, I wanted to recreate that experience. I wanted to have this stable of fighters that I would train with on the regular basis, and we'd get stuff done and go out and win fights. And suddenly, nobody here even knows what the sport of MMA is, and so I had to essentially go out there and sell the sport of MMA, educate the public on what the sport of MMA is. And I realized very quickly my job is going to be radically different than what it was.
Oh yeah.
Like, I wanted in my heart of hearts to experience that type of training I did in the US again every day, but I couldn't. I couldn't because the infrastructure wasn't here. And this depressed me beyond belief for a long time until I told myself I have to do what I can with what I have instead of pining about what I can't have. And
Hmm.
yeah, man, that's the only thing that helped. So I found myself, it seemed like every few months different people would come in the gym, they'd leave, they'd come in, they'd leave. A lot of expats, a lot of foreigners would come and try out MMA because they were like the only ones in China at the time who knew what it was, but they're always moving. They're transient people. They stay in
Right.
Shanghai for 6 months, a year, then they're gone, and then you've invested all that time and all that training into training somebody, then they're gone, and it was like heartbreak over and over and over again until I reprioritized a few things.
Mm-hmm.
Until instead of thinking, I must train a stable of fighters constantly who are going to win fights and get into the UFC and all this stuff, it became, I must make a difference. Whoever shows up to train, I must make a difference. And that, man, that made all the difference.
Hmm.
Apparently, the people in the comments are talking about my arms, saying Ramsey gained some muscles. Oh, check those out, man. Gotta give you the gun show. So, are my arms bigger than they were? I don't know. Maybe it's just the angle. Maybe it's just the triceps. Here, let me flex for you. Not what you're expecting from this podcast,
Why not?
especially after that emotional outburst of mine. So, what were we talking about, Xiao?
Uh, Changing your mentality from training a stable of fighters to making a difference.
Yeah, and it's not that that is the exact thing you need to do. No, you need to do what you can with what you have. So I know you were bummed when a lot of the 2021 EFL crew left the gym and went
Oh
on
yeah.
to do other things. And yeah, me too, because they were my students, man. And I look at my students, they're it's not exactly like family. It's different. It's a very different than family, and it's different than friends. But it's it's like this sacred trust between coach and athlete, teacher and student, and it's very important to me. So it's always it's a little heartbreaking when people leave and go do something else, but I also understand it because I've experienced it so many times. And then the other end of that spectrum is new people come to get out there and train and have that experience. Now, let's talk about the lockdown again.
Yeah, it's worth
Joe,
talking about.
what what did you do during the lockdown? How did you spend your time?
Oh, I,
When
I felt like I was Anne Frank hiding in the attic.
did they let you
Uh,
go outside at all? Like we weren't allowed to go even step outside the door.
um, well, technically, there were days when we were not allowed to step outside the door. Um, I went outside when I wanted to, anyways. The enforcement isn't 100% strict all the time. Nobody's watching the security
Yeah,
camera 24/7. But at times I felt like there was no point in going outside.
yeah, because nothing
Um,
was happening. Everything was closed, man.
so I was in a paranoid state. I thought it's very likely that I will be immigrating to the US soon, and I need to be clean of any type of run ins with the law for that to happen. So I will I will obey the lockdown rules. So
Yeah.
I was so demoralized. I didn't want to go outside. Well,
Wasn't a great time for mental health, man.
thanks to Kyle Rzuski, the
Yeah.
owner of Animal MMA, one of the most legendary fighters of China, well, in China,
Absolute legend, man. Shout out to
absolute
Kyle.
legend. He was running, he was running online fitness classes for us
Yeah.
during the lockdown. He was
Yeah, right out of his home, man.
organizing social events for Friday evenings. It seems that there's just
Yeah,
no
Kyle did a
quit in the
lot
guy.
to promote mental health of the folks in the gym, the students and the coaches alike, and yeah, that can't be overstated. And you know, because during the lockdown, people, you know, it's very easy to just sit there and do nothing. It's very easy to just sit there and be depressed. And Kyle would say, it is very important to essentially get out there and train, get up and do something. And so he'd put up these videos like today's exercise. Everybody's going to do squats for a minute, even if it's just for a minute. Just giving yourself a routine. Every day we're going to do an exercise, or every weekend we're going to socialize online together. And it's yeah, man, that did a lot. That was huge. Just the fact that you have an anchor somewhere, knowing
Yeah,
that there are other people out there.
thank you, Kyle. I'm, I thought I would have had a good time at Animal MMA. It would have been good for me. But I've made my decision to leave, and it bums that I won't be able to train there for a while. But still, thank
Uh,
you, Kyle. In the short time I've known you, it's, it's been inspiring. So during the lockdown, I was trying my best to help my friends who were suffering, but there really isn't much I can do. I felt slightly ashamed of myself. I thought during a time of tyranny like this, a young man who's capable of fighting with nothing to live for, like me, should be out there starting a revolution. But instead, I'm being a good boy and staying inside because I want to potentially live a better life in the future. While I'm not even sure if there's anything worth living for in this world for me.
hmm.
A few of my Chinese friends wanted to immigrate out of here. I tried my best to connect them with people I know, and I tried my best to um, talk to them and share what little bit of life we were still living indoors with each other, so we could stay sane.
Hmm.
Well, I needed them too. Well,
Yeah. So, what are you going to do in the U.S. when you get there?
I will finish my college degree. I'm 4 classes away from graduating from USC. As I mentioned earlier, my early 20s were kind of fucked up, and
Yeah, just 4 classes away.
I was messing up in college. I'll finish my degree and hopefully complete my immigration process, get my green card, and see where I go from there. Mm,
Yeah.
Even for my fight career, it's good to go to America right now because I'm not getting any fights in China. I got one fight canceled in 21 and 3 fights canceled in 22 due to COVID.
Yeah, COVID times have been absolutely horrendous for the fight business, man.
The last year should have been the year where I uh, really take off and make major strides forward, but instead I only fought twice, which is not terrible. It's better than zero, but I really felt I could have done more. I would have done well. Mm. So, but forget fighting even. It's a constant risk that we would lose our ability to get into a gym and train
Hmm.
while we stay in China, and COVID cases are popping up all over the country. It's impossible to tell which city is going to get it next. It only takes one case or a few cases to mess it up.
Yeah.
It's a dark chapter in Chinese history.
Yeah,
A
man,
lot
the
of
zero
people.
COVID policy, it's just weird. It's weird, and I don't know what they believe the logical conclusion of the policy is. It's just weird, man.
There are some. There are allegedly some political struggles between factions that are going on in the Chinese government
Hmm.
that I don't want to get too deep into right now because it's impossible for me to know much on the subject matter, given its secretive nature, also for our safety. Um, but, a lot of people thought a modern metropolis with the level of influence that Shanghai does would never get locked down, but it did for almost 3 months. Maybe things would never be the same for it.
Yeah, it's truly a bizarre time. Again, back in 2019, when the virus first became public knowledge, there was a lockdown. I would say it was a soft lockdown, like the similar to the types of lockdowns most other countries experienced, where they shut down non-essential businesses for a while. You could still go outside and walk around and get groceries and whatever, but there was just kind of a sense of the unknown, like, oh, what's going to happen? Well, we don't
Right.
know. And people would wear masks usually if they went into a public place, and that was about it. And then that sort of ended, and life went back to normal for the most part for pretty much 2 years. And then all of a sudden, we're thinking, yeah, life is great. All these other countries are worrying about COVID, and we're just fine. Lockdown! What happened? What happened?
That was a pretty good description of how it went.
Yeah, exactly. Everybody's over here in Shanghai just feeling invincible, basically. Like, this is the best place in the world to be during COVID. This is great. This is awesome. And yeah, the government had different ideas.
Well, China's alleged success in dealing with COVID has become a major source of national pride for the government and for the people.
Yeah, I remember after 2019, around like 2020, when the initial soft lockdown was lifted and life got back to normal, and a lot of other countries were struggling a lot. I remember taking a taxi, and the taxi driver turns over and he's like, "Yeah, you're from America, huh? Yeah,
Country sucks.
I bet you're glad you're in China because we nipped COVID in the bud. Unlike those other guys, oh man, sucks to be them." I was like, yeah, this is an interesting kind of Chinese nationalism right here. Being very proud of how they handled the COVID situation. And, I mean, back in 2020, I could understand where they were coming from, why they thought the way they thought. But I think right now, anybody who is feeling this way didn't live through the Shanghai lockdown. Like, people in Shanghai are not feeling this way. They're not feeling like, yeah, we handled this great. They're like, that sucked. That sucked. Yeah.
It seems that most people believe that freedom should apply to them, but the government should regulate aspects of human nature and other people that they don't like. Well, I maybe I shouldn't say most people, but I noticed that in a lot of people.
It's not
Uh,
just China. You'll find Americans like this.
Yeah,
A lot of them.
I'm speaking
Find people
globally
from
here.
every. Yeah, globally, exactly. People who feel like life should be a certain way. We should have all these freedoms, but the government should step in with authoritarian power. But we're not going to call it that because it sounds scary if we say authoritarian, and put people in their place when they need it.
Right, right.
Because at the end of the day, man, every country's laws come down to this: a guy with a gun tells you what to do.
Yeah.
Everywhere. So. Let's talk about something slightly less depressing. So the Shanghai lockdown is over. I say over because we don't know. Who knows? Maybe
I hope it
tomorrow
is.
they'll be like, lockdown number 4. Woohoo! Back on. I don't know. It's hard to say. I don't know how they could afford to lock the city down again.
They can't.
I don't think
They
they can.
couldn't
It was an
afford.
insane price tag.
They couldn't
I mean, we're
afford
talking
it
like
last time. Last
in
time
excess
around.
of $60 billion of losses every month. And this went on for how long? 2, 3 months?
It would be extremely difficult, if not impossible, to estimate the number.
Yeah.
A lot of losses would not be accounted for.
Yeah, this is just like what you can roughly calculate, man. We're not talking about loss of human life. We're not talking about loss of jobs for the average person. Pretty much just, yeah, the
Some
price tag itself to the government.
some
Like
people
what it
did
cost them financially.
some people did lose their lives
Yeah.
because they can't make the next mortgage payment.
Mm-hmm.
Some people killed themselves. I saw a video of a couple committing double suicide. Well, apparently the male was holding the female and jumped back first out of the window, and allegedly a, a 2-year-old infant was taken into a concentration camp because of testing positive, and the infant died. The mother killed herself
I heard
promptly
about
after.
that, yeah.
I say allegedly a lot because the flow of information is so restricted in China
Yeah,
to the point
if a
where
video like that gets out, it'll get taken down very quickly.
sometimes it's just difficult to verify the truthfulness
So
of
often these
all
turn into
stories.
urban legends. Like, I heard about this guy who did this thing. I saw the video, of it, or my friend saw the video, or I grabbed it on my phone before it was taken down. You know, this happens a lot. Yeah.
That's just the consequence of censorship. When truthfulness of an alleged event cannot be verified, then anything could be true, and outlandish stories that could be considered conspiracies in a more transparent communication
Yeah.
system would gain much more credibility.
Yeah. You know, there's certain types of information that I wish would not flood the news in America. Take, for example, school shootings. There is an astronomical number of school shootings in the U.S. right now, and
Right.
I think a big part of the reason is because it is advertised and publicized so much. These psychopaths are getting millions of dollars of free publicity every time it happens. Every time it happens, and these are mentally ill, lonely people who want to leave a mark on the world somehow, who want to be remembered, who want attention. And as soon as they see, oh, look, free attention, free publicity, I gotta be on the news, I gotta, yeah, whatever's going through their mind. I mean, this is something I wish wouldn't happen in the U.S. So, to some degree, I understand the good intention behind what the government sometimes does by removing some of this, but it can certainly go too far.
Jordan Peterson talked about this extensively. The need to, the desire to murder indiscriminately because the contempt for being itself is so deeply rooted.
Yeah, like when was a number of years ago, there was a maniac with a knife who went into a school and he started killing children with a knife. This was here in China. I don't remember which city, but again, the narrative was highly controlled by the government because they don't want copycat murders, and that's understandable because you look at America, that's exactly what happens. Guy goes into a school, stabs a bunch of kids, kills a bunch of people with a knife, just as this horrific thing. And the government's official story was, he did this bad thing. We're not going to tell you his name. We will not show you his face. We caught him. We executed him. That's it. That's all he gets. And okay, right there. That's the type of, if we can call that censorship, that I understand. That makes sense.
That's a different thing.
That's a different thing. Yeah.
I thought many American press outlets have started doing the same with mass shootings.
Yeah, I wish all of them would, man.
Yeah, it would.
Because it's just
seems
too much. It's like every other day you hear about it. At this point in history, it's absurd.
there have been a lot of mass attacks in China. Many of them with knives that I've heard of after the lockdowns were over. People are not in a great state of mental health
Oh no.
here in China. It's
Oh man, there was a. So while we were locked down, as soon as they let people go outside, there was a large snake sighted in the garden area of my apartment complex, and there was this community group, like chat group, that my wife followed, and everybody's talking about this snake. And at first I'm thinking they're afraid of it, and then part of me is thinking, oh, maybe they're trying to catch it to eat that thing because they're so hungry. I don't know, man. There was a fun little video I saw early on in the lockdown when a lot of people were struggling for food. They didn't have food storage. They couldn't go out to shop. Nothing was getting in, and so they're worried about their food storage. And there was this couple. They managed to get a bag of vegetables sent to their apartment, a small bag of vegetables. They open it up. A snake comes out. A snake is inside this bag of vegetables. And what did they do? Did they scream? Did they shout? No, they ate the thing. They ate the thing out of necessity.
It could be good. A snake dish could even be quite expensive.
Oh yeah, yeah. There was a restaurant. It was here in Shanghai. Used to be on Hongmei Road. It's not there anymore. But they had the most delicious snake soup with like chunks of snake meat, like thinly sliced snake meat, floating in this like spicy sauce. Oh man, it was delicious. Snake prepared well, amazing.
But you're more Chinese than I am. I've never had snake.
You've never had snake?
Soup.
Okay,
Gotta try
Xiao,
it sometime.
we're going to do a quiz to see how many gross Chinese things I've eaten that you haven't. Okay.
Probably many.
Duck tongues.
No, I've eaten other tongues, though.
You've never eaten duck tongues?
No, I haven't.
Are you even Chinese? Okay,
Probably not.
let's see. Coagulated pig's blood pudding.
Yeah, I've eaten blood pudding before when I was
Okay.
really young. I didn't enjoy it. Now I might give it another try.
Okay, pig ears.
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
you've had the pig ears.
It's brilliant.
Okay, let's see here. Let's go with some Beijing delicacies. Deep fried duck livers garnished with scorpions.
Scorpions, no. I've eaten some livers here and there. It's not something I make a habit of. But what about the gooey paste of insects that you ate in Shandong?
Oh yeah. Yeah, they eat some interesting things in Shandong province, like cicadas. Have you eaten cicadas?
What's a cicada?
He doesn't even. Xiao, you're officially less Chinese than I am. I'm not even Chinese, my goodness.
I know, right?
Okay, cicadas are large insects. They have an interesting life cycle. They live for the first 15 years of their life underground in essentially a state of hibernation or stasis.
15 years.
When they wake up, they come out and they're these large, flying, beetle-like things. They live in trees and they make this loud chirping sound. You probably hear them all over the place, all over the city in the summer. If you step outside this apartment right now, you can probably hear some.
Oh, that's what it is. I hear
Yeah,
them,
those are cicadas, or cicadas, however you want to pronounce that. And they eat those in Shandong province. I went there for a kickboxing match once, and they had a big dinner for the fighters before, the day before the fight. And they bring out this big plate of deep fried cicadas, and they're all black and beetly looking with their little spindly legs, and all the foreign fighters are staring like, what the heck? This is like that scene from Indiana Jones and the what was it, the Temple of Doom, where they're like eating chilled monkey brains and cockroaches and stuff, and we're like, I'm like, well, how bad can it be? I mean, can it be worse than shrimp? I grab one. You can't peel them, though. You can peel shrimp. You can't peel cicadas, so you just have to put them in your mouth, legs and all, and chew them. It tastes like very crunchy, prickly shrimp. It's not bad. If you like shrimp, cicadas, if you can stand the feeling of little wiggly, prickly legs in your mouth as you chew, it's not bad.
I like to get rid of the prickly legs when I have shrimp, but it's not the end of the world if I have to keep them on. Shrimps and lobsters are very insect-like as well.
Yeah, they're very insect-like. I mean, it's a different species, but yeah, very insect-like. They've got exoskeletons. They're cold-blooded, open circulatory system. They're basically insects of the sea. They are arthropods, but crustaceans, a slightly different variety. What else have I eaten that Xiao has not? Okay, those 10,000-year-old eggs. You know, the green, like, pickled ones that they eat around New Year's time?
That's a thing?
That's a thing. They're, like, all gelatinous and... You don't even know what I'm talking about?
Mm, I might know if
It's like a Chinese New Year tradition, especially in Shanghai.
I was not aware of it being a New Year tradition. Is it a black-looking egg that's kind of transparent-looking?
Kinda.
No.
They're greenish, like dark greenish. I think
Oh.
it's like soaked in like horse's urine or something like that for
Ugh.
several years until the shell dissolves and it gets pickled and
No thanks.
it's as gross as it sounds. Yes, I've eaten them. You haven't had them?
I don't believe so. I hope not.
Have you ever seen that TV show Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern? I don't know if it's still on TV. Like 15 years ago, I watched it. And there's this guy, he travels the world, he tries all the weird foods they have in these different countries, which are very bizarre and strange to an American palate. When I first saw that show before I came to China, I was like, You know, I've lived in third world countries before. I've lived in South America, Argentina, Mexico, and they eat some way different stuff than they do in the U.S. They eat like, you know, the intestines, the stomach, you know, the organ meats and so on that they don't usually eat in the U.S. But China takes it to another level because they eat everything. Like if there's an animal and they can find a way to make it edible or part of it edible, they'll eat it. If there's a plant and they can find a way to make it edible, they'll eat it.
Not every Chinese person does that, but there's
Okay.
enough Chinese people that when putting them all together,
When you got like
all
1.5
varieties
billion
of
people, you're gonna find some weird stuff in the bunch.
yeah, that.
Turtles.
Yeah,
Okay, you've eaten turtles. All right, all right. You're at least a little bit Chinese.
it's pretty fatty. I don't know if the variant I ate could be called a turtle, but it certainly looks like one. It was good. I want to try it again.
Okay,
It's
was
been
it
a
like a
while.
hard shell or a soft shell turtle?
I believe I didn't eat the shell, but I ate the meat, and
Okay.
it was fatty.
All right, eels.
Yeah, I ate eel yesterday.
Oh, oh yeah, we ate eel when we went to that Japanese place that one.
Yeah, I eat a lot
Eels
of
are
eel.
great. I love eels.
Oh yeah.
If you go to a Shanghai wet market, they always have these vats with live eels swimming around. You buy them live. That's how you know they're fresh.
Well, I usually eat the Japanese styled eels, and now they come in a package with the seasonings already in place.
Yeah,
It's much
man,
easier to prepare.
the Japanese know how to cook eel, man. They make it the best.
Yeah, they got it
There's a
down.
lot of like Shanghai style eels. It's okay, but sorry, Chinese friends, the Japanese do eels better. I'm just gonna say it. Mantis shrimp.
Mantis shrimp.
They're the weirdest looking shrimp. They have these weird little pincers, like knives they can shoot out like, and they've got big like alien heads and strange segmented bodies.
I
And
probably have.
yeah,
Probably.
it's a really
Sounds
common
scary,
dish
though.
in some restaurants here in Shanghai. They've been discovered to be remarkably intelligent animals, especially for how often they're eaten.
For how for how shrimpy they are. They're pretty smart for a shrimp.
Very smart for a shrimp, yes. Okay, jellyfish.
We talked about it on the other podcast.
We did. We talked about jellyfish for like an hour, man.
I
Have you
probably
eaten them?
did. I probably did.
Okay.
So it's hard for me to translate a lot of these terms from Chinese to English and back.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so so I'm thinking about all the stuff that is very different from what you'll find in America. And I was about to ask you, Xiao, like what are the weirdest things you've eaten in China? But to you, it's probably not weird. It's probably like normal. A lot of this stuff. One of the weirdest things to my palate that I found very unpalatable is glutinous rice. Do you know what
Like
that
the
is?
sticky one?
Yeah, like that sticky glutinous rice. A lot of Chinese people love that. They make desserts out of it. They make like those gooey balls filled with the sesame paste.
It's just rice. It's just carbs. That's sticky. You white man.
Yeah, like I can't swallow that. I've tried to enjoy it. I've tried some of the weirdest stuff out there. I've
get
eaten the scorpions, man. I ate the scorpions. I can't stomach the glutinous rice. Like, I can't swallow it. It triggers a gag reflex and it just comes back up again.
Okay. Yeah.
There's something about the texture. I don't know how to describe it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
The Japanese make this gooey, like sticky bean thing
Yeah.
that a lot of them like, but I'm not a fan of it.
Do you like red bean paste desserts?
Mm, yeah, I mean,
Okay.
I can live without them, but they are pretty good. Red bean paste.
Yeah.
You said the red bean paste doesn't taste sweet at all to your palate.
Not to me.
That's insane.
Yeah.
That's wild.
Okay. For those of you watching, if you're not familiar with Chinese red bean paste, it's a common dessert. At least here in Shanghai, they make this paste. Basically, mush up some red beans, and they put it in certain desserts, like sometimes in pastries. Sometimes they'll put it in glutinous rice or whatever.
Oh yeah.
They even flavor ice cream with it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a good flavor.
and it's like it's as beloved in China as chocolate is in America.
You could say that.
Yeah, it's as common in China as chocolate is in America. So to me, it doesn't taste sweet at all. It's like eating beans. But to Chinese people, they'll often say, "Oh man, I can't eat that. It's too sweet." I'm like, "You mean it's too disgusting?" No, it's too sweet. I don't get it. To me, it's not sweet at all. But I notice, as far as the Chinese palate and the American palate, at least traditionally, maybe not so much with the younger generation because they're eating a lot more sugar than their parents' generation did.
Sugar used to be too expensive
Yeah,
in
sugar used to
China.
be expensive, and it also used to be very rare to find
Oh
anything
yeah,
sweet.
everything was rationed.
When I lived in the U.S., my wife and I had some friends from Harbin, northern China, and we invited them over for dinner. And for dessert, we had brownies. You know, like that very sweet, dense chocolate cake.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, and it had vanilla ice cream on top. Very, very sweet, common American dessert, right? And this is the first time they've eaten brownies, especially brownies with ice cream.
we were just disgusted.
They took a bite, and the faces they made, it was like their mouths were burning. There was like, it's so sweet. It's like the sort of face that somebody makes if they eat like a habanero pepper for the first time and they're just burning up inside, like, I'm dying, it's painful. They were in visible pain eating brownies. And
Yeah, it could get that way when it's too sweet. I like a lot of American desserts conceptually, but the way it's usually prepared in the US is too sweet for me. But I found a lot of dessert places in Southern California that tone down the sweetness, and desserts from those places taste brilliant. Well, that might have to do with Southern California having diverse ethnicities,
yeah,
so it caters more to the preferences of other people's. Also, my desire to eat sweet stuff, my tolerance for sweetness has gotten has decreased a lot as I got older. I used to crave sugar a lot more when I was a kid.
yeah, most kids do.
Oh yeah,
I couldn't get enough of it when I was younger, but yeah. Self-control tends to come with age sometimes.
not even self-control. It's just different preferences.
Different preferences, yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
Want something a little more mild. But which reminds me of something. I will be sidetracking again.
Yeah.
Um, do you say when you are 9 years old? Do you feel that 7-year-old you is silly and you want to delete that version of you? You just you want to you wonder, wouldn't it be great if you have your current wisdom at that age, and when you are say 17
Oh,
you think
okay.
14-year-old version of you is dumb?
Yeah, I had similar thought process to this when I was growing up. I always used to think, man, it would be so great if I could just start all over again with the knowledge I have now. I'd fix all my dumb mistakes I made as a kid, and I'd be like the best human ever. That would be amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of my childhood making that wish, like, man, I just wish I could do it all over again, knowing what I know now. You know, like some sort of little Uncle Rico from Napoleon Dynamite. You ever see that movie?
I'm aware of it. I should
I
see
think
it,
we might have
but I
talked about
haven't.
it in
We
another
have.
podcast, but yeah, Uncle Rico is this older gentleman he's a has-been. He used to play football back in high school. He was Johnny Football Star, and he's like, I don't know, 40 years old and just wishing he could go back in time to 1984 and be a high school football star all over again. If he could just go back in time, knowing what he knew now, he could make it big. He could get to the NFL, whatever, right? And seeing an older guy with that mindset, it's kind of sad. It's comical seeing that in that movie. And it's when I got older, I started thinking, I don't know, I don't think this thought process is as constructive as younger me thought it was. Because it's much more important to do what we can with the time that we have instead of wishing the time away or wishing we could go back and do something else, which ultimately is just wishing the time away in a different method. But why do you ask that, Xiao?
I feel like I finally got into the place in my life where I felt every version of me, what he did at the time makes sense for the time.
Ah,
So there was this proverbial Chinese story that a hungry man ate three pancakes, and after the third, he's finally full, and he lamented, "Oh, wouldn't it be great if I just went straight to the third pancake? I would have saved two pancakes." I think that logic is behind the thinking of, oh, if I was wise at 16 years old, like I am at 20 years old, I would have done so much better in life. So,
hmm.
I mean, I made some detours in life. In I'm in my late 20s now, and I took a lot of years off college and still haven't finished. And
You finally realized you got to eat all of the pancakes to get full, not
yeah,
just the last one. Okay.
but somehow I don't lament that I took these detours.
Hmm.
For example, if I graduated on time in 2018, I might not have gotten into the martial arts hobby at all.
Yeah.
I started training in March 2018, and I took a detour and came back to China, which I didn't want at the time, but I had this Karate Kid slash Cobra Kai phase of my life in my mid 20s, and it was bittersweet.
I remember
It
you
was.
compared me to Mr. Miyagi at one point.
Oh yeah. You are certainly that to me.
Hmm. That's that's interesting that that you mentioned that, man. I just lost my thought. It was super deep and profound. It was going to shake the world. But go on, go on. Maybe it'll come back.
Where was I going with this?
We've both lost our train of thought. Dang it. Maybe maybe we can take a question from the viewers. We have a bunch of people in the live chat right here watching our live podcast. So we're talking about taking detours. Oh yeah, taking detours.
Indeed.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Tom Foolery from the comment section. He says, I took a few detours. I never regretted them. Yeah, the choices you make, even the bad ones, they make you who you are.
Oh
They
yeah.
do. Like, man, I remember my first semester, my first 2 semesters of college. I did terribly. I
Mhm.
didn't know what the heck I was doing. I didn't know how to be a good college student. I failed a bunch of classes. I didn't know how to budget my time. And I got a letter from the university essentially saying, you better shape up or we're kicking you out. And I lost my scholarship and and it was tough, man. And it was like, what am I supposed to do? I can't afford to pay for college by myself. And so I had to go out and get like 3 jobs. And I worked an entire semester so that I could afford to take one class. And I had to get a passing grade in that class.
Right.
And I was like, okay, how am I going to do this? I guess it has to be an important class. What did that do? It forced me to learn how college worked, learn what was important, what wasn't, to prioritize things correctly. I ended up taking, I think it was a political science class to fulfill a social sciences credit. Unfortunately, it happened to be the most difficult class I ever took in college. Fortunately, it was also the most difficult class I ever took in college.
Doesn't get worse.
That was both a blessing and a curse. A curse because I wasn't comfortable, a blessing because it forced me to grow beyond belief, beyond beyond what I thought I could. So I buckled down very seriously. I took that class. I worked harder in that class than I ever did for anything. And I barely passed with a C minus, but I passed. I got that passing grade. I managed to get some scholarships and managed to finish college eventually with new direction. So at first it was like, woe is me, everything's bad. And I cried a little bit over it. Actually, I cried a lot over it, man, because it seemed like everything was coming to a screeching halt. Everything I wanted, I wasn't able to have. But again, these things are often blessings in disguise. The adversity is what shapes us, right? The mistakes that we wish we could go back and change. That's an important experience to have, to wish that you could go back and change it. Like in Christianity, they call that repentance. If you could go back and do it again, but you would do it differently, essentially that's repenting. That's, I am changed. I'm not the same person anymore. I've grown beyond that.
Moving forward.
Yeah, you're moving forward, man. So that's a big deal. That means you're growing up. Young man, you're growing up.
It's weird.
It
Well,
is.
you were comparing the C minus class to barely surviving a difficult fight, right? Like the fights where you get spectacular results are more like easy classes where you score A's and B's, but sometimes it's the hard fought C minus.
Yes.
Barely surviving the fight that's most impactful.
This is something I've talked about with you, but I haven't talked about it publicly. My MMA career was pretty lackluster. I had two types of fights that were way too easy and fights that were way too hard. I never had the experience of having the evenly matched opponent. I never had that experience. And that's an experience that I had it in kickboxing. Like, I had a bunch of great kickboxing matches, but as far as MMA, I never had a good, evenly matched opponent. This is what makes a compelling fight to watch, but it also it's the type of fight that causes a fighter to grow. Essentially, if you had to fight a mirror version of you, who wins? You or the mirror version of you? I mean, that's a fight where you have to push yourself beyond what you thought you could do. I mean, I talked about training with my friend Jordan and how he's one of my favorite training partners because he knows all my tricks. We've trained together for so long, but he's still not a mirror version of me.
Nope.
If I had to fight myself, that would be a tough fight. It would be a fight I could potentially win, but I would not come out of that fight unscathed. Because one, I know all my own tricks. It would also be a guy my own size, my own strength, who can do everything that I can do. That is the ultimate match. The guy who's better than you, like when I fought Leandro Issa, for example, he's a world champion, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt. He was the favorite to win by a ridiculous margin. The fight, it never should have happened, to be honest. Or when I fought Wong Guan, this guy with every kickboxing credential, 2-time national Sanda champion of the People's Republic of China. He was a kickboxing champion in multiple organizations. He was a Muay Thai champion. He was a UFC veteran, etc., etc. That wasn't a good matchup. But when you have a good matchup, a fight where you're not getting out of there unscathed, but you have a chance of winning. It's like that political science like the political science class that I took. It's difficult. It's hard. You're going to hate every minute of it, but it's worth it at the end. That's what the good fight is like. And man, I wish I could have had that one. Again, I had it in kickboxing. I had it in a few Muay Thai fights that I did, a few K1 fights. But in MMA, yeah, didn't have that one.
I often wonder how I will be like when I finally face real adversity in a fight. My first fight, I got hit 5 times total, and that might even be stretching it. My second fight, I got hit 0 times. It was a total shutout. But consequently, I have never faced real adversity. I guess I'll have to go and find out.
Yeah, getting tested, dragged into the deep waters, as deep as yourself. That's a fascinating way to do it.
I also wonder where the combat sports are going. I um, I tend to believe that people watch the fights for the narratives and the characters more than the skill levels.
Hmm.
And we are seeing that in the UFC with certain fighters
Sure, yeah.
like Conor McGregor and Sean O'Malley who don't necessarily have the best credentials currently. Not to say that they aren't great fighters; they are absolutely
Yeah.
amazing. But they built their characters to such a level
But yeah, you got a point. They're characters, exactly.
that they receive more attention than fighters who arguably have more credentials than they do. And we see that more obviously with Jake Paul,
Mm-hmm.
who is, well, quite obviously not an elite world class level boxer, but is pulling in insane numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the fundamental reason is that um, fighting is so innate to human nature that um,
You know what else is innate? Storytelling.
yeah,
It's how we communicate. And if there's no story to go with the fight, nobody cares. If there is a story, a compelling story, the world will watch.
and for people who train martial arts, um, I tend to believe that in the end, it's not about what level they get to, it's about the new parts of themselves that they discover. It's about you becoming you.
Hmm.
At least that has been my experience. Um, is I'm not sure this point is as widely understood yet. Let's go back to top level competitions for a second. I
Okay.
don't think the UFC is even doing such a great job of marketing the fighters
Hmm.
nowadays, and
But Dana White says they are.
they might be doing a better job than some other
Now,
organizations.
it's funny, every time fighters are like, hey, Dana White, how about pay us what we're worth? He's like, I'm paying you in publicity, basically. And they're like, how about insurance? No.
Dana sort of has a point. Now the UFC has such a monopoly over the attention casted on mixed martial arts that it could afford to take such a position, a bullying position over the fighters.
Yeah. It's a similar thing with YouTube. Like, there was a discussion the other day in the comment section of one of these live videos, and I was reading it ex post facto, and somebody mentioned YouTube could afford to lose, like, the biggest YouTuber, PewDiePie or Mr. Beast. They could lose one of those guys
Oh yeah,
immediately, and it wouldn't hurt them at all financially. Yeah, they make money off of those guys. Yes, they make a ton of ad revenue off of those guys, but they represent a drop in the bucket of everything that is YouTube, of everything that is Google.
their content creators are
Yeah.
so diversified.
YouTube would go on without them. Their fans would be disappointed, but YouTube would still go on. It's the same with the UFC. Dana White is in a position where he could cut anybody on the UFC roster, and he has. And he's flexed his muscles and shown, yeah, I can cut you, I can cut you. Take, for example, there was a fight between DeMarcus Johnson. He's a guy I know used to compete on the same show I did back in Salt Lake City, Utah when I lived there. And he's a good fighter, and he fought through the Ultimate Fighter, made it onto the UFC, and he was fighting. Oh man, forget the dude's name. Another good fighter. Both very good fighters. Both very exciting fighters. They have a fight, but Dana White tells them before the fight, whoever loses this match gets cut from the UFC roster. And I'm just watching this match like, no, I like both of these guys. These are both two of my favorite fighters. No, come on, man, not cool. And they both put on like the performance of a lifetime, and afterwards, cut.
Didn't Kobe Covington have to put on this right-wing jerk persona to avoid being cut?
Probably.
Well, that's the story that's been going around.
Yeah,
He was considered boring because he's an efficient wrestler.
Yeah, he had to put on a character, had to put on a mask, if you will. Yeah, the UFC invests a certain amount into, what do you call it, social media for the fighters. Like even over at the UFC Performance Institute here in Shanghai, they have a social media room, right? They've got their main training room, they've got their mats, they've got their cage, they've got their boxing rings, they've got their heavy bags, their weight rooms, their cryogenic therapy chambers, and all this other stuff. And then they have the social media room where they help the fighters out with their Instagram accounts and their YouTube and their Chinese social media or whatever it is they're going to do to get their names out there so they can promote a character. Not just a fighter, not just I'm good at fighting. It's the let me make you care about me game as
Right.
much as it is the let me win a fight game. It's hard for people to understand this, and I understand Dana White gets a lot of hate over this, but he's also got a difficult job because he has to make people care about the UFC. And essentially, he's pumping out the same thing over and over again. A bunch of guys get in a cage, and they scrap, and they beat each other up. The end. At first, it's kind of a novelty to see it if you've never seen a no-holds-barred fight, if you've never seen an MMA fight. It's like, okay, that's neat. Okay, next. But then he has mastered this art of being the type of promoter who can draw you back in again and again and again. I've seen so many MMA promotions, pro MMA shows come and go very quickly and just absolutely tank because they couldn't make people care. There were a bunch of them here in China, like, we're the first pro MMA show in China, care about us. Okay, let's see what this MMA thing's. Yeah, we saw it, we don't need to see anymore, bye. And then they tank, right? How many times does this happen? Over and over and over again. So it's a minor miracle that Dana White is able to make audiences consistently care to the point that the UFC is profitable, let alone as profitable as it is.
Yeah, promotions like Bellator and One Championship had to put a lot of their fights on YouTube for free.
Yeah.
The monopoly is real right now.
And One Championship was not an overnight success. Like a lot of people don't know, it didn't even start as One Championship. It started out as Martial Combat. And it was broadcast on ESPN Star Sports across Asia. And it was competing with cricket and tennis and maybe golf. And people didn't care as much as the promoter wanted them to care. And they struggled a lot at the beginning. They struggled a lot, but then they rebranded, and they got some different guys to help promote the show, and they've done a phenomenal job with what they had to work with, man. But it was a rocky start.
I feel with fighters, there is potential to tell a much more compelling story than the stories of athletes in well-established sports. Say, for example, an elite soccer player who got to the top level, probably trained since he was 8, was a part of an academy of some elite European club since he was 12, worked his way up the ranks, and when he gives interviews, he is trained by the public relations specialist in his club to answer in such a way that is vanilla and doesn't offend anyone and sheds his club in good light. In a generic way. But a fighter who, say, for example, fights in the UFC could have started in his 20s.
Yeah.
someone who started in his late teens is considered to have started early. And they might have been going to college or working odd jobs to make ends meet while they are while they were training and fighting, especially in the early days. And they would have that would be a position that ordinary people could relate to more. I feel, and also the fact that combat sports attract a lot of people with rocky backgrounds in mental health.
Yeah.
I think that's a compelling point for storylines as well.
So what's your story, Xiao? Well, you told a lot of it so far. You go into the U.S.
Yeah, I have.
You're going to pursue the American dream, eat some apple pie, but not if it's too sweet,
Not
because
if it's too sweet.
it's not going to agree with your palate. And
I will
yeah.
keep pursuing a fight career.
Okay.
I wonder if I could get to the low levels of professional.
You know what you're going to do, Xiao? You're going to turn into a jiu-jitsu nerd when you get to California. Xiao he's predominantly a striker. He loves
yeah.
striking, loves kickboxing, and you start to grapple with him, and he's like, "Ew, get off me! Ugh. Keep your homosexual tendencies to yourself, white man." Oh man. So
I've spent a lot of effort on grappling. I mean, before my MMA debut, obviously, but even after that fell through, I still worked on it. I feel like I've come a long way. My
Yeah.
wrestling defense is still rocky though. Well, there's so much stuff to work on. Anyhow, I will keep pursuing a fight career in America. I hope I don't have to wear headgear for amateur matches. That would suck, man. I hate headgears.
yeah, I mean,
I hate them.
it's great to prevent black eyes and torn off ears and stuff in the gym when you're sparring, but for competition, man, it causes a lot of problems.
Having to adjust the mid-fight. Also, my vision is so obstructed with the headgear. My defense ordinarily doesn't rely on a high guard. I rely on my vision and head movement and foot movement. So having a headgear just sucks. Also, the fact that the headgear adds a layer of isolation between the head and the high guard that you can't get feedback for the high guard to act as a shock
Yes.
absorber almost when you do use the tight high
Yes,
guard.
it takes away the tactile sensation
yeah.
of, like, I need to feel like a thumb on my face. And if there is foam between my face and my thumbs, it's weird. It's like
It's like
it
the
takes
shock,
away that. Yeah.
the shock absorber is no longer connected to the car.
Yeah, exactly. And real quick, we got a super chat from our friend Mateo. Again, it's not a Q&A, but I think I'll answer this question because it is related to the lockdown.
Sure
And we
thing.
were discussing that. So Mateo sends in this super chat and he says, "You're getting big, Ramsey. Respect." Oh, gotta flex those muscles again. But he asked this, what parts of training and life have you changed to achieve that? So I made a video about this, about some people were noticing when I started making videos after the lockdown that I'm physically larger than I was before the lockdown. And it's kind of paradoxical because essentially we were working through a starvation scenario, at least a lot of people in Shanghai
You weren't
were.
able to
I
lift
wasn't
weights?
because, well, yeah, I got my dumbbells right over there, a whole rack of them, man. Look at that. That's how I got huge, right there. That's like, what, 2.5 kilos? That's like 6 whole pounds. No, but yeah, I made a whole video about this. And so I basically stopped moving as much. We couldn't go outside. The whole city's locked down. Can't train, can't go to the gym. And we didn't have enough water. We had
Oh,
maybe
Jesus.
about a month and a half's worth of water. Again, Shanghai doesn't have potable water. We had bottled water about 2.5 months, or 1.5 months worth. The lockdown lasted about 2.5 months. So I was thinking we have to ration this out because I don't know when we can replenish the water supply. And so I'm thinking, I sweat a lot. I sweat a lot when I train. I can lose a gallon of water easily while training, easily. And I couldn't afford to do that. So essentially it was like, don't sweat, don't sweat, don't sweat. So I went from essentially doing a marathon of training every day, an absolute marathon, like 8 hours of training every day, training myself, sparring, strength and conditioning, training my students, teaching several classes, to essentially doing almost nothing except for once a day I would do a few heavy lifts, trying not to sweat too much. And I was eating less than I ever had. I went from eating like an excess of 5,000 calories a day before the lockdown to eating basically like one meal, sometimes two. Okay? And so I'm eating less, I'm moving less, I'm exercising less, and I'm getting huge. It sounds kind of strange at first, except essentially, think of it like this. Who's bigger, a sprinter or a marathon runner?
Sprinter for sure.
Yeah, sprinters generally, they look aesthetic. They're big, they're muscular, they got big quads, they got big arms, they got big pecs, they're chiseled, they look like Roman statues, right? Whereas the marathon runners tend to be skinny, gangly, and nobody's really impressed with that physique, even though they can do some very impressive things. They can run forever, okay? But there's also a huge difference in the way they're training. The marathon runner is literally running marathons. They are just going non-stop. And it's a training regimen that is not conducive to putting on weight, not conducive to putting on size. They're eating tremendous amounts of food to fuel themselves. They might be eating 5,000 calories a day like I was. Sometimes more. I've heard about like distance swimmers who eat in excess of 10,000 calories a day. Or triathlon athletes who eat some ridiculous number like that, okay? And these are numbers that like bodybuilders, like heavyweight bodybuilders, wouldn't even think about touching. They'd be like, oh, that would make me obese. But anyway, so I went from marathon-style training to moving very little, doing a couple heavy lifts every day, and trying not to sweat. And after about 3 months of that, yeah, I put on a lot of size. Actually, maybe not that much. It's like more visible size than it is actual weight. I went from about 96 kilos to about 104 kilograms maximum weight. So I guess that's a substantial weight gain.
You gotta skip the cardio, kills your gains, bro.
That's what we're saying. Cardio kills your gains, bro. But if you want to be a fighter, so much of fight training is cardiovascular training. Heavy bag work, working the speed bag, skipping rope, running if you're into that sort of thing. Sparring, man, sparring is cardio. And if you do a lot of it, like as much as I did, like I would do at least one, either a sparring session, MMA, kickboxing, boxing, or like a jiu-jitsu open mat, like a 2-hour sparring session every day. It's a lot, man. It's a lot. So as soon as I wasn't doing that anymore, the weight came on. The gains train came. So, what about you, Xiao? Did you have any like noticeable differences in weight or eating habits or anything like that because of the lockdown?
I got skinnier.
You got skinnier. Okay,
Yeah.
a lot of people did.
During the first few days of lockdown, I genuinely thought the food supply would be limited. So I limited myself to a meal a day. But as the lockdown went on, it seemed that it's more likely that I could get food.
Yeah.
So I ate as much as I wanted, but it's still less than usual because I wasn't moving around as much. And,
Yeah, when you
I
move
didn't
around
have-
more, you tend to get hungrier.
I didn't have access to lifting, and I think I visibly lost muscle.
Yeah.
I lost weight too.
Yeah, I've thought about this for a while. Like if I stopped, I'm not going to do this, but if I just stopped combat sports training altogether and just focused on like strength training and bodybuilding, I could probably get massive. Now, that's not going to happen because I'm going to keep training, and man, fight training is such an enormous use of energy.
Mm-hmm.
It takes a ton of calories to do it. So if you are looking for a way to spend more energy, burn more calories, maybe lose some body fat or something like that, yeah, fight training is a great way to do that. Not everybody needs to fight, but everybody should train. So,
Should we take other questions?
yeah, let's open up the podcast to questions. Let's do a Q&A with the coach and with Xiao. So, this is now officially a Q&A. So, send us your questions. I got my phone right here looking at you. Xiao, if you wanna check out YouTube, do you have a VPN on your phone?
Yeah,
right there?
yeah, I do. Huh.
Okay. So yeah, if you just look at my YouTube channel,
live on YouTube.
you'll be able to find the
Go for
live
it.
stream and see all the questions pouring in. So send us your questions, and we'll answer your questions for a bit here.
Speaking of fight training, the results sure come slow though.
Yeah.
Like I remember always hurting my wrist on the heavy bag, needing to
Oh, yeah.
stretch forever before I kick halfway decent. Shins hurting on the heavy bag, stuff like that, and
Yeah, results come slow,
I forgot the
much
exact,
slower than people want them to.
I forgot the exact moment when I stopped hurting my wrist almost ever on the heavy bag, and getting my kick checked in sparring isn't desperately painful anymore, and one day I just don't need to stretch as much to kick, even with my weaker leg.
Yeah.
A lot of that came in the past year.
Did a remote video collab earlier today with Rokas from Martial Arts Journey, and he'll be publishing that video in a few weeks, hopefully. And we were talking about martial arts for self-defense, and the hypothetical scenario was if the average woman trains in the following martial arts for 1 year, like how good are her chances at successfully defending herself against some random larger, stronger guy attacking her on the streets? And that was a tough question to answer, because 1 year it's not a good time frame to get great results in. I mean, we always hear about the quick fixes, the get ripped in 3 easy steps. I did this one thing for 30 days and now I look like a fitness model, and that's not how it works, guys. It's not how it works. Now, you can get a lot done in a year if your programming is intelligent. You can get a lot done in a year, and you definitely should invest that time, but the gains in martial arts, if you will, come pretty slowly in some ways. Okay, some things you can learn very quickly, like you can learn the fundamentals of Taekwondo, you can learn those in a day. The basics of boxing, you can learn those in a day. It's going to take you a lifetime to master them, but you can learn basic techniques that you can pick up and play with in a day. All right, let's take a look at some of these questions.
Sure thing.
Let's see. F.A. Kareem Dem, I don't know how to say your name, I apologize, says, it's going to be out of topic, but can you recommend me a martial art to train by myself? I have a little background in Muay Thai and BJJ. Okay, I get this question a lot, like, I'm training by myself, I'm not going to a gym. What's the best option? What are the best martial arts for solo training? Ooh, good question, man. Good question. Off the top of my head, I would say it's training by yourself is going to be a little bit counterproductive after a certain point. You can do all kinds of fitness training by yourself, and that's a big part of it. You can do flexibility training by yourself. You can copy moves from a book. You can punch and kick and shadow box by yourself. You can hit a heavy bag by yourself. But eventually you're going to need other people.
I think solo training is a lot more productive when the person already has experience sparring,
Yes.
preferably fighting,
Yes.
training with other people.
Yeah, because then you know exactly what you're training for. If you have never trained with other people, if you haven't sparred, if you haven't fought, you don't know exactly what you're training for. You have a rough idea, and often it's a false idea based on like a movie or something you imagined or your feelings, but not on reality. So you can get a lot out of solo training if you have the context of experience, like Xiao was saying. But yeah, work on strength and conditioning a lot, work on flexibility, shadowbox, watch fights. When you have the chance, go out and train with other people. All right. Do we have other questions? Again, we've opened up this podcast to a Q&A.
Where do you find the questions? Just
Oh,
in the
just
comments?
looking through the live chat. Yeah, sometimes people write questions. Sometimes they send in super chats, which stand out. You can't miss those. Hint, hint. Wink, wink. Oh my, we have a spam link to an adult dating site. Great. Wow. Huh. That's not a question, dude. Let's see, can we,
What's your favorite cheese? Okay.
Alright, let's report some spam here. Sorry, spam bots.
Sure.
Don't want you here.
There are people debating whether boxing or MMA results in more brain damage in the chat.
Okay, sure, let's talk about boxing versus MMA as far as brain damage goes. Well, there is one way to win a boxing match, which is punch the other guy until the fight is over.
Usually in the head.
Usually in the head. Yes, you can hit him in the liver. You can end fights that way. Most of them don't end that way. There are multiple ways to end an MMA fight. You can end an MMA fight without throwing a single strike. I've done it. I've finished fights via submission in round one without a single strike being thrown. And that's awesome, but that's also the rare exception. That's not normal. Okay? But there are multiple ways to end MMA fights. You can end an MMA fight via knockout. Yeah, same as boxing. You can end via TKO. Same as boxing. You can end via submission. Not the same as boxing. So you don't have to suffer brain damage tapping out. And a lot of the tap outs are quite anticlimactic. We're expecting a big brawl, then all of a sudden, oh, the dude broke his posture. He's stuck in a guillotine choke. He's tapping out now. Oh, he gave up his back. We wanted to see the fight continue, but it's over because, nobody bled in that fight. So MMA fights have the potential to be less damaging than boxing, but are they?
Also, the 8 count in boxing resulting in a lot of...
Yes. The 8 count in boxing, the mandatory 8 count in boxing, when a fighter gets knocked down, okay? He got hit so hard, he got knocked off his feet, not slipped, because sometimes fighters slip and the referee will rule it as a slip and the fight continues. There's no mandatory 8 count there, but if he gets knocked down, the referee rules it as a knockdown, right? He gets 8 seconds where the referee counts and the fighter, if he stands up before 8 seconds and proves to the referee, okay, I'm not concussed, I'm okay, let me continue. If the referee believes that, he'll let the fight continue. And this is problematic because you cannot look inside the fighter's skull and determine, oh yes, he's concussed, oh no, he's not. I've reffed a bunch of boxing matches, I've done it, and I hate giving the 8 count, but those are the rules, so you have to do it. When fighters get knocked down, you've got to make your best guess, and that's all it is a guess. I mean, if the guy's all loopy and he's not steady, obviously you're going to end that, but a lot of times concussed fighters can get up, they can look you straight in the eye, they can tell you everything you want to hear. It's just programmed into them, and you can let them continue, and then it can happen again multiple times each round. And how many rounds does a professional boxing match
12.
have? 4 to 12. In modern times, they used to have up to 15. In fact, in the olden days, they used to have unlimited rounds, but rounds weren't timed. A round in the olden days used to be until the fighter got knocked down, and then they would consider that the end of the round.
You said a lot of them were taking a squat to take a break,
Yeah,
right?
a lot of the times in those old boxing matches, they would just take a knee when they needed a break, to be honest. That happened. That's why a lot of those old boxing matches went for hundreds of rounds. I kid you not, hundreds of rounds. Why? They weren't getting slapped around for hundreds of rounds. They were taking breaks for hundreds of rounds. Let's be honest. Sweet. Mika says, Ramsey, your volume is way better now. Thank you, because we did a very, very thorough microphone check before this podcast, making sure that the volume didn't suck this time. So, thank you.
very extensive checking.
This dude wants to know what our favorite cheese is. Xiao, do you even eat cheese?
Yeah, I do. I don't know all their names though.
Yeah. Man, what's a good cheese? I don't think I have a favorite cheese. Oh, I do. Government cheese. Government cheese, man. If you don't know what government cheese is, go to urbandictionary.com, and I think it's definition number 1. It might have changed because I haven't looked it up in a while. But it says something like this: government cheese was the most fantastic, amazing cheese ever. It was the one thing that poor folks had over rich folks. Because basically it was like the surplus artificial cheese that the government would give out to poor people in the United States. So when I was a kid, we got these giant blocks of government cheese sometimes because we were kind of poor by American standards. And that stuff was delicious. It was amazing. Some people compare it to Velveeta, but I've had Velveeta. It's nothing like government cheese, man. It's not the same. It is not the same. Oh, man, not the same. So I don't know if they still make that stuff, government cheese. It probably gives you cancer. I have no idea, but that stuff was delicious. It made the best grilled cheese sandwiches. So to this day, that's my favorite cheese. So all you French folks out there who eat that non-pasteurized cheese that is illegal to bring into the United States, and you love it because it's delicious, and Americans don't know good cheese because they can't legally get it in the U.S. Did you know that? You can't take non-pasteurized cheese into the United States. It is a crime. I'm serious. They got some weird laws in America, but yeah. Delicious cheese is a crime in America. I kid you not.
That sucks.
Yeah. But yeah, you can get all kinds of cheese. You can get like fancy French cheeses here in Shanghai. They've got a pretty strong French presence in Shanghai, so
Oh yeah.
Swiss stuff as well. Like the Swiss make some great cheese. I had a student from Switzerland, and he brought me back this cheese package, and oh man, it was great stuff, man. Swiss cheese. I'm not just talking about the, what do they call it, the Emmental with the holes in it that Americans usually call Swiss cheese. But yeah, a lot of great soft non-pasteurized cheeses. Great stuff. I don't even know what they're called. Why are we talking about cheese so much? All right, let's answer maybe an MMA related question. A lot of people are asking about the upcoming fight between Charles Oliveira and Islam with the unpronounceable last name. I'm sorry, I don't know. Makhachev, okay. And we talked about this in the last podcast with Jordan and Nick. And Nick said Charles Oliveira all the way, and the fans were like, what? What but Islam? He's like one of those Khabib-like guys, right? Isn't he going to do exactly what Khabib did? Maybe, maybe not, but we have to remember, he's not Khabib. He's a different guy. Do you have a prediction on that fight?
No, I don't.
I don't either.
It's close to call. It might end up.
It is. It's one of those well-matched, evenly matched fights where it could go either way. And the UFC is pretty good at putting these together. They have good matchmakers where they can put the scorpion and the tarantula in the jar and shake it up a little bit and watch them fight, and you don't know what's going to happen, but you know it's going to be cool. That's what this fight is. It's one of those, man.
It could end up like two good grapplers facing off could end up in a striking match, like Usman and Covington.
Yeah. You know, the last time I gave an opinion about a UFC fight, the outcome, I don't like doing that. I like watching fights and analyzing them. I'm not one of those guys who makes predictions like, this is going to happen, mark my words. But the last time I made a fight prediction, man, I was way off. It was the rematch between, what's his name? His nickname's like Funkmaster.
Aljamain Sterling.
Aljamain Sterling,
Piotr
yes.
Yang.
And Piotr Yang. I, like many other people, I think most other people thought that Peter Yang, however you say his name, was going to take that and take it pretty handily.
Yeah.
And that was not the case. So...
Can't blame them.
Yeah. Essentially what happened was Aljamain Sterling got out there and trained and took that fight very seriously. He clowned around on social media holding that belt up and doing all these other things. and being a character and selling that fight, doing a phenomenal job selling that fight. And he surprised me and he surprised everybody else, essentially saying, it wasn't a fluke, I actually am a good fighter, surprise. So yeah.
Good for him.
So what other fights are coming up that people care about? Everybody is excited about
Israel
Charles
Adesanya and Alex Pereira.
Okay.
I'm really looking forward to that one.
Okay. Do you have a prediction on that one?
No,
I don't, but
no.
yeah.
Israel would seem like the much more versatile striker, but Alex Pereira has demolishing power. It's the story of the fundamental striker versus the flashy one.
Okay. The fundamentals versus the flashy one. This is kind of what happened when Michael Venom Page fought fought Lima. The first time Lima leg kicked him and
fell forward.
Fell forward and knocked him out. And the second time he got into that same position, leg kicked him. He started to stumble, but Michael Page managed to get out of the way, and that turned out to be a much more compelling fight than the first one, which surprised people. But yeah, it's we have the flashy striker versus the more fundamental guy.
I guess that would be a fault of the Karate Blitz.
Yeah.
Where the weight gets
side stance versus the leg kick. That doesn't mix well.
Also, when a karate fighter is blitzing by switching stances and leaning forward, the weight is all placed on the front leg.
Yes.
And Douglas Lima kicked that out.
Yeah.
It's a great way to cover distance, but it does open up counters. Also, all the forward momentum resulting in a counterpunch. I got counterpunched a few times when using the Karate Blitz.
Oh yeah, it's a high risk, high reward movement when essentially you throw yourself forward, just launch yourself like a torpedo at the other guy.
Mm-hmm.
It can work great. I mean, Jack Dempsey did that stuff all the time in his boxing career, just blitzing guys, and it paid off a lot. He played a high risk, high reward game, and other fighters who followed his style, like Mike Tyson, for example, modeled his training after Jack Dempsey. High risk, high reward game. He played it very, very well. Not everybody does, not everybody can. What are the odds of becoming a decent fighter and athlete in Muay Thai starting at age 29? My life goal is teaching this martial art because I love it, but I don't know if I started too late. Look, take care of your body. Don't grow old before your time. This is a question from, how do you say the name? Broken with the number 3 instead of the letter E. Broken wants to know, he's 29 years old, wants to start Muay Thai. He loves the sport. He wants to coach it one day. Is it too late? No, it's not too late. But like I'm saying, take care of your body. Here's what happens with a lot of dudes in Thailand. I was reading through some comments. Tony Jeffries, the boxer, he's got a great YouTube channel. Go check him out. But I was looking at his Instagram account, and he does some reaction videos where he watches sometimes people do some silly things, and he just shakes his head, and he's like, ah. Anyway, he's watching this video of certain fighters taunting the other guy by allowing them to punch them in the face. And he showed a clip of Elong, who's been on the podcast also. He's a Chinese fighter. He dresses up like a Shaolin monk, and he allowed people to punch him in the head a bunch of times, and he put on some exciting fights. But in this particular fight, and Elong and I talked about this in the podcast, he broke his nose. He can't breathe through his nose anymore because of this specific fight. And Rod Tang was also featured. Rod Tang, the Muay Thai fighter, and he's taunting the other guy, letting him tee off on his face a little bit, like, aha, you can't hurt me. And people in the comments were saying, Elong and Rod Tang, they're built different. They're not normal human beings. They're superheroes. They can take it. No, they're not built different. Like I said before, Elong can't breathe through his nose anymore because of these antics. Rod Tang is 25 years old. He's 25. He's not built different. He's 25. He's young, and he's still relatively healthy. He keeps that up long enough, he won't be young and healthy anymore. He might be young, but he won't be healthy anymore.
So Rod Tang is just an out-of-this-world Muay Thai fighter, a true phenom.
Yeah, Now look, the average Muay Thai fighter retires before the age of 25. Rod Tang has had the fortune of being talented enough to avoid sufficient damage to his brain to put him into retirement at this point. But 25 for a Thai fighter from Thailand is pretty old. Why do I say that's pretty old for a Thai fighter and not for you at age 29? Why? Because these guys have been taking their lumps since age 5. They've been fighting once or twice every week, every year since age 5 in full contact Muay Thai fights. And the body cannot sustain that. You only have so many fights to give. You only have so many hard sparring sessions to give. And if you do 200 fights between age 5 and age 25, you have this 20-year career where you are just getting beaten, where you are taking lumps for 5 rounds every week, sometimes twice a week. That's not good for your brain. You will age horribly. You will age horribly. But again, Rod Tang, 25, young guy. At this point, he can get away with it. In the future, that's going to follow him. That's going to haunt him.
Are we
So-
talking about whether it's too late to start for the guy?
Yeah, so you're 25. I'm imagining you haven't had 200 Muay Thai fights.
He's 29.
Yeah, 29, yeah. I imagine you're asking me this question, so you probably haven't had one Muay Thai fight yet. Can you train? Can you be a coach? Do you need to be a great fighter to be a great coach? No, absolutely not. There is a who's who list of great coaches, some of the best coaches in combat sports, boxing, MMA, kickboxing, etc., who either never competed or competed only as amateurs or had a very short-lived professional career. Freddie Roach, very short-lived, unimpressive professional career, one of the all-time great boxing coaches. Oh, man. Faraz Zahabi, let's talk about him a little bit. You know, he's a good kickboxer. He had some sort of kickboxing career. I don't know what organization he fought in. I don't know if he was pro or amateur, but he was never a professional MMA fighter.
I believe he was an amateur champion.
Okay.
Might be at the national level.
That sounds
as
like
a
it might be right.
kickboxer.
I'm not sure. But he was never a professional MMA fighter. And yet, he's one of the most prolific, well-respected coaches of MMA fighters. Greg Jackson, one of the great MMA coaches of our time. One of the best guys to ever do it, and yet never had a professional MMA fight. Pretty much name one of the boxing greats, one of these Hall of Fame guys in the sport of boxing. There's a high chance that their coach was never a professional fighter. Blanking on some names here. Hands of Stone, Roberto Duran, his coach. What was his coach's name? Ray Arcel. He was never a professional fighter. He never fought. Castiamato, he could box. He knew the game, but he was never a prolific boxer. He was never a champion. Did he even fight pro?
I'm not sure.
I
Apparently, he
think
had
he-
some injury.
Yeah, I think he might have just had an amateur career. I'm not sure. Look that one up. But he was not a prolific boxer. Anyway, my point is, you're 29. You haven't experienced 20 years of brain damage from Muay Thai fighting. You love Muay Thai. You can be a great coach. You can get out there and train. You can learn a ton. I would say all of the important things I learned about Muay Thai, I learned after age 30. My first professional Muay Thai fight, I was 24 when I did my first pro Muay Thai fight, okay? But all the important things, all the big developments in learning the sport of Muay Thai, I learned after age 30. And I think I was better suited mentally. I was in a better place mentally to learn that stuff at age 30 than I was at age 24. I was much more mature. Man, your brain doesn't even finish forming properly if you're an adult human male until after age 25 anyway. I mean, you're 29, you're a lot smarter than you were at age 24, I'm guessing. You're a lot smarter than you were at age 17 or 16 or whatever age people think you're supposed to start training. So the moral of the story, just get out there and train. Xiao, how old are you?
I'm 27.
27. Okay. He's not a spring chicken anymore, folks, but he's not an old man either. He's young, he's spry, he's able-bodied, right? How old were you when you started training?
23. It took me 3 years to take it seriously, though.
Okay, that makes sense, yeah. And not a day goes by that some 20, 21-year-old young man doesn't send me a question like, am I too old to do this? No.
Someone asking at like 21 years old is just ridiculous.
Yeah,
I believe
it's obscene.
Rob Font of UFC's bantamweight division started when he's 26. Now he's one of the top ranked bantamweights. It's one of the most stacked divisions.
Yeah, and the average age of a UFC fighter is 29 and a half years old.
The average
Pushing 30.
average age of a champion is something close to 35.
Yeah,
Maybe slightly younger.
yeah. Thanks, Randy Couture, for bringing that age up, man. He was champion, and he was like pushing 50. Like, maybe not
I'm
that.
talking about the current ones.
Yeah, but man, Randy Couture in his mid 50s, champion of the world, 2 belts in 2 divisions.
It's just
Man,
insane.
they don't make him like that anymore.
He might indeed be built different.
Let's see. Tom Foolery wants to know who are our favorite professional fighters. He's calling you Liu, which is your surname. If you don't know, Xiao is his given name. Liu
Indeed.
is his surname. So Liu Xiao, it's like, it's the inverse of the way they do it in the West, generally speaking, with the surname at the beginning and the given name afterwards. So
Ramsey put it in this order out of his respect for the Chinese language. But when I'm in America, I often put it given name first and family name second as well. So, favorite professional fighters.
favorite professional fighters. Genki Sudo. Talked about this before. Go watch that video. It's a good one. How about you?
I'll have to name a few. Stephen Thompson, Michael Venom Page, maybe Cyril Gahn,
All the fancy karate striker guys.
something like that. I might be forgetting a few. Oh, Raymond Daniels, for sure. That might be the guy I'm most stylistically similar to. But I don't really have a favorite anymore. I try to learn a little bit of something from everybody.
Yeah. And again, some of the fighters, man, I love a lot of the old school guys. Like, man, Randy Couture. Again, they don't make him like that anymore. Randy was just, he was, if you're going to say a guy was built different, no, built different mentally. I mean, he was physically imposing, but man, that dude had a will to win like few human beings have.
Randy Couture.
Randy Couture.
Well, Chael told a story about Randy Couture's training regime that really stuck with me.
Yeah.
He said he only trains for an hour every day. Well, that might be slightly inaccurate, but the point is he doesn't train a lot every day, but he trains every day.
Yeah.
That means after he gets banged up in a fight, on
I mean,
holidays,
he's consistent, yeah.
yeah, he trains every day.
Consistency beats volume.
So that might result in a combination of not wearing out his body too much and a consistent routine like skill improvement.
Yeah.
That really made his career last a long time.
Another cool thing about Randy Couture that I really love is how he really helped to pioneer modern MMA training. Now, he was kind of like that second generation of MMA fighters, like after, the original UFC, after they started the rules, basically, after unified rules. But in that day, people still didn't know what the sport was. They didn't know what it could be. They didn't really know how to train for it. And so something Randy did, he had some old tapes of this. He would recruit everybody he could find from like every different martial art style who was willing to spar with him. Like he would get in the ring with karate guys and kickboxers and aikido people and judo guys and just whoever was willing to spar with him. And spar with him and take video of it and take notes and just try to figure out a system of the most efficient way to train for this brand new sport. Like, what is this? How do you train for it? Because every other sport has a training methodology. Like if you look at the way NFL football teams train, they have a methodology. They have a system down. Like, this is how we do it. This is how we win games. This is a multi-million-dollar industry, so we have to take it seriously, right? MMA wasn't that. Nobody knew how to train for it. Nobody knew what sport it was. And Randy essentially was trying to codify it, trying to write the rule book, if you will, of training, not the rules of the sport, but the rules of training before anybody. So, man, huge respect for that guy. What other questions do we have? Who is the most well-rounded fighter of all time?
That's highly subjective, almost impossible to answer.
Unless you belong to the Church of Jeet Kune Do, in which case it's Bruce Lee. The most well-rounded fighter of all time. Like, if we're talking about fighters in the UFC, let's narrow it down a little bit. The most well-rounded UFC fighter.
Someone like Georges St. Pierre comes to mind.
Okay. I'd say that's fair. A lot of people probably wouldn't pick him right away because he won so many of his fights with his wrestling, but he's a really well-rounded fighter.
He's a good striker.
If you look at his early career, you see some very prolific striking. Like that time he did that beautiful spinning back kick against Matt Hughes, knocked Matt Hughes across the ring. He lost that fight, but phenomenal job with the striking there. I think people forgot how well-rounded he was because he focused so much on the grappling.
When we talk about well-rounded fighters, we are talking about someone who reached championship level, if not sustained themselves as a champion for
I
a long
suppose
time.
so. If we're talking about like the best in the world, the most well-rounded, I mean,
But someone like Israel Adesanya wouldn't qualify as one because he's predominantly a
yeah,
striker. I believe he's never shot a takedown ever.
he's about as one-dimensional as a UFC champion is going to get. Like he's not ignorant of grappling, but he's not a grappling specialist. Like everyone in the UFC cross-trains in jiu-jitsu and wrestling and
Oh yeah.
every aspect of grappling. They have to, or you won't succeed in the sport. But he's not a specialist in it. So by that qualification, yeah, we can't say he's the most well-rounded. I mean, if you look at Anderson Silva, he had black belts in everything. He had black belts in judo and Brazilian jiu-jitsu and capoeira and whatever else. And
Doesn't seem to use it as much.
yeah, and we never saw any of that. Well, we rarely saw
Well,
that aspect of him in the cage because he was so busy playing a striking game.
I wouldn't say never. When he did use it, sometimes it's incredible.
Yeah.
Like when he triangled Chael Sonnen,
Yeah.
or when he up kicked that dude in Japan, which resulted in his disqualification. But I think that's a silly rule. Up kick knockout from the bottom is spectacular, I think.
Yeah.
But
So-
the rules are the rules. Or someone like Khabib, who's arguably the most dominant champion ever, probably wouldn't qualify in this list because he doesn't use his striking as much. It could be considered questionable, his ability of striking.
Here's an interesting question from the Okami who says, and I've answered this question before on my channel, but I would be interested to hear what you have to say about it. He says, how to deal with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, or anxiety with competition and fighting. I'm a Muay Thai fighter, but I feel like I don't have it in me to do fights anymore. I would appreciate your thoughts.
He said
this-
any more, so he
Yeah,
had
he's fought-
sustained.
Yeah, and he's experiencing PTSD from these fights. I get it, man. I get it. I understand
I don't know,
that.
man. I'm in no position to answer this.
And it might be because of beatings you took, or it might be because of beatings you've given out. Both of those things can be traumatic. And I don't think people in combat sports talk about this enough. Like, beating people up is traumatic. Getting beaten up is traumatic. I think it's probably easier to deal with getting beaten up than it is to deal with beating someone else up. Because when you get beating, when you lose, a bad thing happened to you. It's not your fault, right? You can cope with that mentally. It's easy to cope with. I had a bad day. Okay, whatever. I'll train. I'll be better. I'll win the next one. But when you are the monster inflicting damage on somebody else, doing something that in any other context would be morally reprehensible, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and tell yourself, I'm still me. I'm still a human. I'm not a bad guy. Am I? How do you live with that, man? A lot of people have a hard time with that.
Well, he will have to specify his PTSD further
Yeah,
for us
so
to.
my friend, if you could if you could tell us a little bit more about the situation, that would be helpful. But yeah, talking about it, that's definitely a good start. Because again, most people don't talk about this. They don't talk about the PTSD associated with fighting. People are just expected to just suck it up and take it.
But finding someone to talk to about any form of PTSD is so hard.
Yeah. Because you have to find someone who's been there and done that, and most people haven't. Most people, haven't had a professional Muay Thai career. They haven't beaten people up. They haven't taken those beatings themselves.
Also, just someone willing to listen.
Yeah.
It's hard to come by.
It is. It is. Yeah, it's tough to say, man. So find some people you can trust. Maybe talk to some other fighters. And fighters aren't always the most open people to just put their feelings out there and wear them on their sleeve, but
some of them are.
Some of them are.
Michael Jai White said that fighters are among the most sensitive, emotionally sensitive people that he knows of. I think there's some truth in that.
And Krav Maga practitioners and Aikido practitioners are the most emotionally oversensitive people on the internet.
I don't pay much attention to.
That's not actually true. Probably the most overly emotionally sensitive person on the internet that I've met so far has been Commander Dale Brown of Detroit Urban Survival Training. Man, so a while back, Chewy from the Jiu-Jitsu channel, go check out his channel if you don't. It's great Jiu-Jitsu content. Anyway, Chewy and I did a video collab where we tested out some of Dale Brown's, dust techniques to increase your survivability, and we played it up for laughs a little bit. We picked on some of the worst techniques. Not everything Dale Brown does is terrible, but a lot of the stuff is, and we picked on the stuff that's terrible, like this little ballerina spin and a badly done footlock and so on.
I remember when you used his technique on me, I blocked, and I was saying, "You don't need to go to jail, man. Go home, smoke some weed."
Yeah, Xiao was in that video.
That was the pinnacle of my comedy career. Well, I was about to call Krav Maga traditional martial arts, but it's clearly not traditional.
Did you read Dale's reply to that video?
He called me your little friend.
He called me your little friend. My little friend, yes. That reply was like 50 pages long. That reply challenged the character limit of a YouTube comment. I did not know YouTube comments could be that long. It was like a novel. He wrote the Bible as a reply to that video.
I didn't see the comment itself, but you let me know of it. I'm honored that I'm part of the lore now. Well, thank you, Commander Dale Brown. It's Commander, right?
Commander, yes.
For mentioning me. Krav Maga is clearly not a traditional martial art, but it's like the oversensitiveness of the people who practice that seem to appear a lot in traditional martial arts community too. So I would just call them non-applicable or non-practical martial arts. They all have the common theme of no sparring or very limited sparring. I don't pay much attention to these circles, but you do. You like to pick on them. And it always surprises me.
Because they make so much bad content on YouTube, and people watch it and people believe it, man.
But when you make me aware of it, it always surprises me how much attention they are still getting to this day.
Yeah.
It's not rocket science
that
if you want to learn to swim, jump in the water. If you want to learn to fight, go spar. Well, maybe don't knock your training partner's head off, but
just go to a good fight gym and follow simple instructions, get out there and train and be consistent. It's not rocket science like you said, and yet because there are so many different martial arts schools with so many different labels, and not all of them are good, and you don't know which of all the martial arts schools should I attend. Oh, I don't know. There's just so many of them. It can be confusing to a noob who doesn't know any better.
I get it that new techniques, new trends appear in MMA all the time, like the calf kick, the the linear kicks to the knees and thighs that were all the rage a few years back, and the Weasel who is constantly talking about how the sidekick is underutilized in MMA. I tend to agree with him.
Yeah.
But these things don't change the fundamentals. These new trends, new techniques don't replace the fundamentals that need to be in place to make a fairly complete fighter.
Exactly. If you want to land side kicks to the head, like a good Chinese Sanda fighter, and there are a few of them in the UFC who are doing this, like, oh, what's her name?
Zhang Weili?
No, not Zhang Weili. Xiaonan.
Song. I forgot her surname as well.
I don't remember her surname. Her given name is Xiaonan. Anyway, she has some brilliant highlight reels of landing side kicks to the head, Sanda style in MMA fights. But if you want to be able to do that, your fundamentals have to be sharp. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to know how to wrestle so you don't get taken down. You got to know all of the fundamentals. Otherwise, when you try to sidekick people in the head, you're going to get taken down. But she can do it because her fundamentals are sharp. Again, that sidekick, that Sanda style is not replacing the fundamentals. It's built on top of them.
Oh, yeah.
Let's see here. Maybe we can take a couple more questions before we call it a night. All right, folks.
Late.
Yeah. What other questions do you have? Okay, Max Zhao wants to know, hey Ramsey, if strength is so important, how much of my training time should be dedicated to it? Could UFC fighters beat a strongman or not? Okay, 2 questions. Strength training is super important. You should do strength and conditioning on the regular. How much time? You should be able to get your strength and conditioning done in 90 minutes. You don't have to spend all day at the gym. If you are, you're wasting time. You should be able to get everything important done in a strength and conditioning session done in 90 minutes. Now, how often should you do it? That depends. If you're not doing any strength and conditioning right now, add 2 or 3 days a week. That's going to be game-changing for you. When you get past those newbie gains and you want some additional gains, then maybe start looking into some different programming. Oh my, the adult dating site Spambot is back. I thought I banned you from the chat. Be gone! Be gone!
Be gone!
The next part of Max Zhao's question is, could UFC fighters beat a strongman or not? In a strongman competition, the strongman would probably win. In a mixed martial arts competition, the professional MMA fighters would probably win. Now, there have been some notable exceptions. For example, what's his name? Marius Pudzianowski, unpronounceable last name, who was a world strongman competitor, crossed over to MMA, and then he knocked out one of the most prolific Gracies who ever stepped foot in the cage, and that was eye-opening to a lot of people. Like, oh, that's the opposite of what we thought would happen, since we saw Royce choking out some big, strong dudes. But the big, strong dude just punched out the Gracie dude. Inversion.
At some point, the physicality will overcome the technique.
Yeah, there was nobody like Marius in UFC 1. Nobody that strong, nobody that athletic.
Depends on how big the strongman is, his other attributes besides being strong, like speed and stamina, what level of fight training the strongman has, and how small the
and he actually
MMA
trained. He
is.
didn't just step in there with 0 training. He took the fight seriously. He learned how to punch. He learned how to move, and he put that to work, and he knocked out his opponent.
Speaking of strongman, do you think the sport would benefit if the 260-pound, I believe it is, limit of the heavyweight division is removed?
Wait, say that one more time.
Do you believe it would benefit the sport if the 260-pound limit of the heavyweight division in the UFC is removed?
Oh, I don't know about that. What I would love to see is the addition of a super heavyweight division. So 260 plus pounds with no upper weight limit. That would be amazing. That would be amazing. And I don't know why nobody's talking about it in the MMA community. So far, the only person I've seen with any considerable reach on YouTube even talking about this was
Joe Rogan.
Not even Joe Rogan. Greg Doucette, the bodybuilder. Greg Doucette, the bodybuilder. He's got a bodybuilding channel. and he made a video titled something like "The UFC is fat phobic," and I was like, huh? What the heck? And so I click on this video to see what his whole thing is, and he's talking about how the UFC has a weight cap, the heavyweight division, at 265 pounds, meaning if you weigh more than that, you have to be able to cut down or you can't compete. And he's like, there are a lot of great athletes who weigh in excess of 300 pounds, and what about them? I was like, exactly, I've been saying this for years, and nobody pays attention.
Seems obvious.
Yeah, it seems obvious. Now, in smaller MMA shows, they often do have super heavyweight divisions. For example, the first MMA show I competed in had a super heavyweight division. And they'd usually, the super heavyweight division was populated by Tongan guys. Because there were a lot of dudes from Tonga and Samoa in Salt Lake City, where I was living at the time, where I was fighting in the U.S. And yeah, those were some big boys, man. Huge human beings. And it was fun, man. It was really fun to watch those fights. And they were athletic. A lot of people, they mistakenly think that all super heavyweights are just going to gas out in 30 seconds. Some of them do, the guys who aren't good fighters. But the dudes who do that magical thing, get out there and train, guess what they can do? They can fight. And it's awesome. So, man, I wish the UFC would include a super heavyweight division. It would be amazing. Now, to go back to your original question, if they simply took away the upper weight limit in the heavyweight division, I think a lot of the current heavyweights would try to drop down to light heavyweight to escape from the flood of giants that would come into the UFC. I mean, think about it. Brock Lesnar, a guy like that would no longer have to cut weight. They would no longer have to cut weight. Look, almost everybody in the UFC right now, we're not even watching the best fighters fight at their best. We are watching them after dehydrating to the point of near death and then rehydrating and then getting in there and putting on these phenomenal performances in spite of all that physical suffering they go through. The average person, anyone who has never had to cut weight before does not understand this. That is the hardest part of the fight for most fighters, is cutting weight, is sweating off a significant percentage of your body weight and bringing yourself to a near-death experience. And then you have to go fight after that. That is insane to think about. It's absolutely insane. Now, if you took away weight cutting entirely from the sport, which is what you're proposing, if there was no upper weight limit, like, I don't know if boxing still is this way, but it used to be. The heavyweight division used to have no upper weight limit back in the day. I don't know if it still does. But if the UFC was like that, we would suddenly see fully hydrated, 100% capacity fighters going at it as essentially super heavyweights. That would be amazing. That would be more game-changing than steroids, to be honest.
It seems to me same-day weigh-in could solve the problem.
It would solve every problem.
If the fight falls through, it falls through.
Yes, fights already fall through. That is the argument people give against same-day weigh-ins, and I've been pushing this narrative for the longest time because weigh-ins kill people. They kill people. And it's a huge detriment to the sport. It's a huge detriment to fighters. It shortens lifespans. It's terrible. It needs to stop. There are so many controversies, so many fights that get canceled anyway because of stupid weight-cutting issues. Take out that entirely and just have the fighters step on the scale before they get in the cage. If they don't make it, then they don't fight. Oh, but some fights will fall through. Fights fall through anyway. When the UFC came to Shanghai, I was so excited because Anderson Silva was on the card. I got tickets. I was like, sweet, my wife got tickets. She was like, I want to see Anderson Silva live because she was a fan. He's an exciting fighter. And what happened? He got popped for some illegal substance and replaced with Michael Bisping. Bless his heart, Michael Bisping. What a trooper, man. Went in there and fought with one eye. Nobody even knew it. And, he got knocked out. But he gave it the old college try so that we could still have a main event, trying to give the people what they paid for. But at the same time, everyone's like, but we really wanted to see Anderson Silva. That's why we bought the tickets. Oh, well.
Calvin Gastelum. I would imagine he would give Anderson Silva a hard time too, considering he gave Israel Adesanya a really hard time.
Yeah. I
Maybe
think
the hardest
he was
fight
a
for
heavily
Israel.
underrated fighter at that point in his
Yeah,
career.
he
Like,
was
I think
fairly
they just
unknown.
threw him in there as like, let's give Anderson Silva an easy fight.
Well, it could also be construed as feeding the veteran to the young lion.
Maybe, but I think honestly, the UFC's intention in putting Anderson Silva in the UFC Shanghai card was just to give a local Chinese audience a big name that they recognized.
Oh yeah.
Because most Chinese people they don't watch the UFC a lot, and if they do, they only recognize the biggest name. And at that point, that name was Anderson Silva.
So Anderson had a stint in Japan.
Yeah. The average Chinese audience member, they didn't know who Wang Guan was. Wang Guan was fighting on the card. Xiao Nan, whatever her surname is, she was fighting on that card, I think. Um, who else? The Leech, Li Jingliang, he was fighting on that card. Most Chinese people at that time had no idea who their local fighters were. Yet they were all on the card. They knew who Anderson Silva was. So that was a marketing ploy basically, and I think the promoters wanted to put on a show where the audience could see Anderson Silva win, just like they saw it on TV, just like they saw him do it on the internet. And so the idea was to feed him a noob, if you will. But I think they heavily underestimated Kevin Gastelum in that fight. I think he would have done pretty well against Anderson Silva at that time.
Yeah, considering how similar Anderson is to Israel Adesanya, or vice versa, Israel could be considered a more advanced Anderson Silva.
Yeah. I mean, he took out Michael Bisping pretty handily. I mean, there's the eye issue, and he had a fight not long before with George St. Pierre, and was still recovering from injuries from that one, but still, man, he made short work of Bisping in that fight.
Michael Bisping is not an easy fight for anyone.
No. All right, maybe one more question. Xiao, do you want to pick a question this time?
Oh, let me scroll through the list.
I've been picking, I think I keep picking the same questions over and over again. Like, am I too old to fight? No. Because I think it gives me a certain satisfaction to answer that question over and over and over again. No, you're not too old to fight. Just get out there and train, man.
Hugo Aymar Varen says, "Hey guys, what do you think? How much does glove size matter for reducing brain damage?"
Okay, glove size.
Are you talking about for sparring? I always believed for sparring, controlling the
Yes.
power of your strikes is more important than any glove size.
Yes.
I trained at this gym in LA briefly. They made me wear 16-ounce gloves. Well, I wore smaller gloves until I got caught. But I don't know, man. I don't think I can do 16-ounce. I have small hands.
Yeah. You should be able to spar bare knuckle without damaging your training partners. That's how much control you should ideally have. Now, what a bigger glove size does, and this is how you can use bigger gloves to spar safely. They do not inherently protect your training partners. They are not a free license to just punch recklessly and try to knock your training partners out.
Neither is headgear. It could be
Neither is
argued
headgear.
that headgear barely protects
Yeah.
against head damage, if at all. Just protects against lacerations.
Yeah. Let's say you have a 16-ounce glove instead of an 8-ounce glove. Okay? That 16-ounce glove does not inherently protect your training part. It actually allows you to punch harder with less damage to your hand. Here's how you use that as a safe sparring tool. Since it has additional foam, like an extra couple inches of foam on the glove, it's going to compress a little bit more, which is a larger margin of error. Okay? So essentially, as soon as you feel the foam start to compress, that is your cue to pull the punch. Because if you feel the foam compress and then you're like, I want to feel my knuckles dig into his skull, that's too much. Don't spar that way. Save that for fighting. Save that for the heavy bag. Save that for the mitts. Save that for the once-in-a-while hard sparring sessions that you might do on the rare occasion. Okay? For most of your sparring, pull those punches. Use the foam as a guide as that margin of error of when to pull the strike, as opposed to thinking of it as a safety device to protect the other guy no matter how hard you go.
I think I would assume that a lot of people who have a desire to spar hard come from a place of not knowing if their martial arts work in a live situation.
Uh huh.
I mean, I never sparred hard. I kind of take pride in never hurting my training partners in sparring. I always had good control. But I had that doubt too before my first fight. And after the first fight, I no longer had a need for that.
Yeah. And not all gloves are created equal either. This is really important. I'll give you a few examples. I've got a pair of 60-ounce gloves from Fortis Fight. They sent me a pair of gloves. They make good gloves. They're quality leather. They got some good straps. They fit really nice. But I don't use those ones for sparring. And I'll tell you why, because they're really stiff. They're great bag gloves. I use these for heavy bag work. And they feel great on my hands. I can punch so hard in those things. They're nice and stiff. They got a nice pop to them. I used them for sparring once, and afterwards my training partner's face was scratched up. Just scratched up, specifically because they're just so stiff. Now, I've got another set of gloves from Anthem Athletics. I love them. It's a great set of 60-ounce gloves. They're a lot more plush. They're softer. These are good gloves for sparring because when I go light, they compress and I can feel how much it's compressing, so I have this nice tactile cue of when to pull the punch. Now, there was another set of gloves I had from Everlast. This was an 18-ounce pair of gloves. Probably the biggest gloves I've regularly trained with. 18 ounces. Comically sized, right? But the padding on this was so plush and so soft that you could feel my knuckles through it. So after maybe like 3 months of use, yeah, you could feel the bone through certain parts of the gloves. So the number of ounces printed on the cuff of that glove is not enough to go by. Okay? Every glove is different. The foam is all shaped differently. It's going to feel different when it hits you. Some gloves will hurt a lot more than others.
It's not like the automotive industry where there's regulating bodies,
Yeah.
Checking the standards of production.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, even in the automotive industry, there's Dieselgate with Volkswagen.
Yeah, even in professional boxing, there's no like one standard glove. I mean, I think in the Olympics there is, but in professional boxing, the rule is essentially the boxers agree between each other what kind of glove they're going to wear. Or the promoter, let's say, for example, Floyd Mayweather promotes his own fights. And in his fight with, I think it was Conor McGregor, I remember they published the fight contract on the internet. And he had some stipulation about which gloves they were going to wear. And it was like, your gloves have to be among the following brands and has to be, the following number of ounces. It has to be made of this particular type of, I don't remember if it was leather or synthetic leather or whatever, but he was very specific about what type of gloves Conor was allowed to wear. He could choose from a certain number of them. And that makes perfect sense because Floyd is a guy who understands that every boxing glove is different, and certain boxing gloves are going to give you certain advantages in a fight that others will not. So he wants as much of an advantage for him and an even playing field for the other guy as possible.
It's very common for the opponent's corner to check the glove of the other fighter, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you are allowed to do that. You're allowed to check the wraps of your opponent. Your cornerman is allowed to do that, and also check the gloves.
It's more common for the corners to catch cheating than it is for regulating bodies to
Yeah,
catch.
and I would recommend that your cornerman do that. Watch the other guy tape up his gloves. I have been doing this for all of my fighters ever since my last fight. Why? I'll tell you why. Because not doing that almost killed me. Okay? My last fight, it was against this dude named Wong Guan, who's just an absolute killer, and he doesn't need any help to knock people out with his bare hands. He's just an amazing striker. The promoter of this fight event, instead of giving out standard sports tape and standard gauze to tape up the hands, put kinesio tape in the bags with the other tape that the fighters were wrapping their hands with. Kinesio tape, you know, that stretchy, strong stuff you use as a mobile cast. And some of the fighters, including Wang Guan, put some of that kinesio tape on their hands. I don't think he was trying to cheat, but what that's loaded wraps. That gives you an insane advantage if you have kinesio tape, that stretchy stuff over your knuckles, around your fist, locking your bones into place. What happened? He broke my skull in multiple places with a single punch, and now I got a blind spot in one eye. It almost killed me. So don't take that lightly. Do not just ignore that privilege. It's not just a rule, it's a privilege that your cornerman has to keep you safe, because no one else is going to do that for you. No one else is going to do that job for you.
The only other notable instance of a skull break happening is when Michael Venom Page flying kneed the Brazilian man.
As he shot in full speed for a double leg takedown.
Yeah, but
boom,
that was
collision.
a knee and a collision. And Wang Guan did it with a
He did it with a punch.
Ground and pound
Yeah,
punch.
one ground and pound punch. Just one right overhand. Boom. Yeah. There was one other fight that had a skull fracture to the frontal bone, to the forehead. This was, it happened a few months after my fight in South Africa. I don't remember the guy's name, but essentially he was grounded. He's on the bottom. His opponent lands like 30 undefended elbows to his forehead. The referee should have stopped it. Weirdly, the dude on the bottom who had the skull fracture, who took all the elbows, ended up winning by armbar. He managed to pull off an armbar in spite of all of that. Yeah. That was the end of his fighting career as far as I know, but he still won that fight. Crazy story, man.
But at what cost? At
what cost, indeed. Like that, it's not an injury you can walk away from it. I had to retire from the sport that I love. I had to retire from it. Man. Combat addiction is a real thing. Like for years afterward, even to this day, when I watch UFC fights, I find myself like starting to move involuntarily in the ways that I would move in that situation if it was me. When I corner fighters, I find myself doing that same thing, like twitching around, moving the way I would move if it was me. It's even when I worked as a fight commentator for Kunlun Fight and some other fight shows, man, I do the same thing. I'm like talking through the thing and I'm moving like, you know, it's like, stop moving, body. I'm just trying to talk here. Stop trying to fight. You're not in there. It's not your time. But the body just wants to do it. It's combat addiction. So, yes, have your cornerman go watch the other guy tape his hands, make sure he knows the rules. There are a lot of crappy cornermen out there, and they just want to be a big shot. They want to be seen at the event. They want to be like, oh yeah, I'm cornering a UFC fighter. Look how cool I am here. And post an Instagram story, something like that. Don't let those guys into your corner. Make sure the guy in your corner is a guy who is willing to drive you to the emergency room to get your face stitched back together and stay with you and make sure you are alive and well and, you know, gives you the best option for survival. Man, I'm speaking from experience, man. You don't want a schmuck in your corner. You want someone who cares about you, because it is a matter of life and death on many occasions. Fighting is an inherently dangerous sport, which sometimes, unfortunately, results in serious injury or death. So protect yourself at all times, including after the fight. Have the right guy in your corner. Anyway, that's my spiel about that. I should probably make a whole video about that topic, because it's that important. It would save lives. All right. Someone wants to know, last question of the day, who would win in a fight? Liu Xiao or John Wick?
John Wick would murder me in so many ways. Have you seen the size of that guy? It's not even... It's clearly a competent martial artist.
But John Wick is a fictional character. You could be a fictional character too, Xiao. We could write a movie where Xiao beats up John Wick. And if we put it to film, it's as much of a movie as John Wick is, therefore it counts, right?
Well, if we were just talking Keanu Reeves, he's a much bigger dude than I am. his martial arts ability is not it's not as easily evaluated as someone like Donnie Yen, who had a plethora of fight scenes.
Here's a more intriguing question. Who wins in a fight, Bruce Lee or Batman? So we have a real person, a real historical person, but a real person who is highly fictionalized by his fans with these mythical
Right.
superhero style abilities versus an actual fictional superhero.
They could exist in the same universe in a crossover. I would watch. I would absolutely watch.
So let's go with like the fictionalized version of Bruce Lee that the members of the Church of Jeet Kune Do believe in, their Lord and Savior, Bruce Lee. What is like the Chinese word for like like Shifu is like sir, or sometimes they'll say it to like a kung fu master. Is there like a higher word than that, like
No.
grand master?
But it should be pointed out that Sifu, as in a master, a teacher, has different characters than
Yeah.
the Sifu that you call taxi driver
Yeah,
or
yeah.
repairman. It's a different character.
It sounds the same, but there's a different
The
character in
second
there.
character is different. Well, it just
But either way, I think sir is probably a good
it just
translation.
means teacher.
Yeah.
Well, in old time Chinese culture, the teacher was a more venerated figure. But Bruce Lee versus Batman. The character of Bruce Wayne seems to be partially inspired by Bruce Lee too, because
They have the same name. Whoa.
Lee was believed to be this guy who strived for physical perfection through obsessive exercising.
Yeah.
I mean, he kind
And
of
that's
was
also
that.
what Batman did. He pursued physical perfection. In fact, if you look at any Batman origin story, that's always how he's described. He's a mortal man who trained his body to physical perfection.
There seems to be some Bruce Lee influences there.
Mm-hmm.
But back to the question.
You know,
John
Bruce
Wick.
Lee, the actual real historical Bruce Lee, did star in an episode of the Batman TV show with Adam West and Burt Ward.
Yeah, the
And he
Green
fought
Hornet.
Robin. He didn't fight Batman, he fought Robin. And Robin kicked his butt a little bit. which probably made a lot of the Bruce fans mad. Like, no, that was a fictional character. Robin isn't real. Burt Ward isn't a real fighter. But in the choreography, Robin kicked Kato's butt.
That shows his position in the entertainment industry
Yeah.
more than anything.
Yeah.
Well,
Essentially, he was a visiting side character, and he's playing second fiddle to, the main characters, Batman and Robin.
John Wick kicked the butt of Mark Dacascos in the last John Wick movie. He's probably gonna kick Donnie Yen and Scott Adkins' asses in the next one. I think all three of those are better martial artists than Keanu Reeves.
Oh, for sure. Those guys are amazing stunt people and fight choreographers and so on.
I'll be arrogant here. I think I have a good chance against Keanu Reeves. He's in his mid-50s, and it's not self-evident that he has... he obviously has decent martial arts ability, but a lot of his grappling stuff, and striking too, seem to be intended for the screen instead of for real combat.
I
It's
heard he
questionable whether or not he sparred all that much. Someone like Donnie Yen definitely sparred a lot, but
Yeah, I heard that Keanu Reeves had some health issues. I'm not sure what they were, which is part of the reason in the last Matrix movie, the fourth Matrix movie, that there wasn't a lot of kung fu fighting, and said he's like using the force and using his telekinesis basically most of the time.
Well, Keanu Reeves is big, but I doubt he's bigger than Jock. I kicked Jock's butt a bit when he was a noob, so I'll be arrogant there and say that I have a good chance. But John Wick, no, John Wick murders me.
John Wick murders everyone. That's his job, man. That's literally his job. But people are talking about Batman versus Bruce Lee in the context.
Oh, they're talking about that now.
XONTYR says Batman, no contest. Oh, Dennis Mason says that Burt Ward actually had a brown belt. I don't know what style, but had a brown belt and was buds with Bruce Lee.
Who?
Burt Ward, the guy who played Robin in the old
Oh, okay.
Batman TV show.
Yeah, Bruce Lee was really not happy that he was getting his butt kicked by Robin in the TV
Oh
show.
yeah, Bruce
It
Lee,
was,
he hated to lose on film.
yeah.
He hated that. Like there was a great interview Chuck Norris gave about when Bruce Lee invited him to play the bad guy in Return of the Dragon, and he pitched the movie to
Way
him, and
of
he's
the
like,
Dragon, I believe.
he pitched the movie to him, and Chuck Norris said, so you wanna beat the world champion, huh? And Bruce Lee said, no, I want to kill the world champion.
Which he did with an arm and guillotine.
Yeah, a very badly performed arm in guillotine. I'm just gonna say it.
He tried. He tried.
He tried. You know, bless Bruce Lee's heart for showing grappling techniques on film at a time where it really wasn't a thing that was done. Although if you look at cinema from 20 years previously, there are tons of examples of judo and old school jiu-jitsu being shown on film in America, in Hollywood. But it kind of got swept under the rug until Bruce Lee kind of came back and said, look, grappling is sort of a thing too, but mostly punches and kicks.
Well, he was a young man. He was evolving as a martial artist too. I'm sure if he lived longer, he would have evolved a lot,
Maybe.
like Donnie Yen did. But speaking
Maybe.
of the arm and guillotine he did, that might also be the start of the trend in cinema where where the chokes are portrayed as,
It's like neck breaking techniques.
yes, as a
Yeah.
snapping motion.
Yeah,
Only
because they had all those
recently-
snapping sounds. He's like squeezing and then.
I don't know if Bruce Lee intended for that to be dramatic, or maybe that's just his actual understanding of the technique. But that seemed to have started a trend, and recently in cinema, though, it seemed to be corrected in a lot of movies.
Yeah, I always thought it was kind of fascinating. In the two instances I can think of where Bruce's character kills a guy in the movies, he always looks kind of sad and remorseful afterwards. Like when he breaks Chuck Norris's neck, as he's doing it, he's like, at first he's super intense, and he's like, ah! And then he's just sort of like frowning, and he just looks like, what did I do? I feel bad now.
That man is a work of art for sure.
And then there's Enter the Dragon, where he kills Bob Wall's character, and he jumps up, and at first he's like, I'll kill you by stomping on you, ah! And then in slow motion, his face kind of goes into like this sad, melancholic look, and it's a very poignant moment in an otherwise, just fairly straightforward action scene.
Well, Bob Wall did did sexually assault his sister in the film.
Yeah,
It was heavily implied that Bob Wall raped his sister.
yeah.
resulted
It
in
probably
her
sounds
killing
bad
herself.
because I'm sure Bob Wall is a great guy in real life. We're using the actor's real name.
O'Hara.
The character O'Hara sexually assaulted. Yeah, anybody who's seen the movie knows this, but Bob Wall's character, right? We're not defaming Bob Wall. I'm sure he's a fantastic
Oh, yeah.
human being.
I have no
Maybe.
doubts.
I have no idea. I don't know the guy. But, yeah. But yeah, that's interesting. It's like Bruce Lee, he goes into that fight, and you can see it in the body language. There's like no dialogue explaining what's going on, but you can see it in the eyes. Like, I think Bruce Lee is one of the most underrated actors by American audiences. He won awards for some of his movies in Hong Kong before he was in America. You know, his non-kung fu movies.
But he
But-
also has very limited range. He always portrays some version of himself.
He always does that, but a lot of actors do. A lot of actors
yeah.
do that. But he was able to capture emotion in a way that a lot of actors aren't. Going back to that scene, just reading the body language of Bruce Lee in that scene where he's fighting Bob Wall's character O'Hara, and at first he's motivated by revenge, and you see him leaping up in the air, and this is all happening in slow motion. They're overcranking that camera to get that old school slow-mo effect, and you see at first anger and rage, and then he stomps on the guy, and it changes from anger and rage to, did I get what I want? No, I feel hollow, I feel empty. It's not what I expected. It's like a shallow victory, and you see like kind of sadness and melancholy
yeah.
on his face after that. And it just speaks volumes about revenge. Like usually in the movies, like say John Wick, for example, it's a movie all about revenge. It glorifies revenge. It tells the audience, if you get revenge, you'll feel better.
I'm not sure if I agree. It seems to me that John Wick is about Wick having nothing else to live for. It's like a suicidal fantasy almost.
I suppose you could say that, but there are plenty of revenge movies out there. If we thought about it, we could think of like 5 or 6 of them pretty quick. But again, Bruce Lee's character in Enter the Dragon is different because he's originally motivated by revenge, and then just through the body language, we see a completely different story unfold. That revenge did not make him feel better. That revenge did not solve the problem. It did not bring his sister back, and it ate him up on the inside. Like you can see that just in the face. It's a beautiful moment of acting, if you stop and think about that. But yeah, Bruce was heavily underrated as an actor, and he gave an interview. It's the same interview where he said, "Be like water, my friend," where the interviewer asked him something like, "How do you feel about your stardom, about your rise to fame?" And Bruce said something like, I don't like being called a star, man. Like, I would rather people say, "Hey, I think you're a really good actor."
Yeah. Something.
Did you remember that part? Something like that? Yeah.
I do.
And it's so annoying to me where the Bruce Lee superfans, when you call Bruce an actor and mention that he was a good actor, they get mad. They're like, "Are you saying Bruce wasn't a legitimate martial artist? How dare you say he was just an actor?" I'm like, you're not hearing me. And you're definitely not hearing Bruce. That's what he wanted. He wanted to be remembered as a good actor.
He did a lot in his short life. He ran martial arts schools. He was a full-fledged actor, a highly successful one.
Yeah.
He was only 33 years old, maybe 32 when he died. So he didn't have the time to be a fighter. So
When I was a kid, that seemed old, and now it's like, wow, he died young, didn't he?
He sure did. Also, there were no kickboxing competitions in America at the time. Well, there was Vale Tudo in Brazil and Muay Thai in Thailand.
Yeah, other countries had stuff like Sambo in Russia.
USA
but,
only had
America, especially where Bruce Lee lived, it was karate culture.
Point karate.
Point karate culture.
She did not agree with. Where was I going? One of the first kickboxing competitions after Bruce Lee's death was tributed to him, I believe.
I'm going to try to ban the spam bot again.
Go for it.
They are just leaving an incessant volume of comments. Come to our adult dating site. Don't listen to these guys talk about Bruce Lee.
What a
Come
shame.
watch some porn. Don't watch porn, guys. It's bad for you. Just don't.
Also, even all the way up until Dominic Cruz's days, Dominic Cruz had to fight much bigger opponents because there were no weight divisions beneath 155 pounds. Ironically, Dominic actually knocked out a lot of the 155 pounders he fought. It was later on in his career when he was fighting smaller guys that he became a point fighter, a decision fighter. It's just there's levels to this game.
Mm-hmm.
But Bruce Lee at 135 to 140 pounds would have had a hard time finding a weight class for. Actually, that might not be true either. There were like early 20th century boxers. The Jewish guy, what's his name, who fought at 130 pounds, right?
Yeah, boxing weight classes were way different back in the day. Like you had guys like Tommy Burns at 165 pounds as heavyweight champion of the world. 165-pound heavyweight. Right. That doesn't happen today. That's unheard of today.
People were smaller back then.
And they were smaller, but there was no upper weight limit, so he was fighting guys like Jack Johnson, who just dwarfed him, absolutely dwarfed him in that fight. But then again, Jack Johnson was like basically my height and my weight.
Yeah,
he was like 6'1" and about.
He's real technical too.
About 200 and maybe 220 pounds. Actually, he was less. He was less than that. He was just barely like 200 pounds, I think. So it's weird to think like I'm bigger than Jack Johnson. But I mean, if you watch him next to Tommy Burns, man, he looks like He looks like an absolute giant.
So
But yeah, back in the day, people were smaller.
ancient boxing had more well-established, diversified weight classes than early MMA when Dominic Cruz was coming up. Wow, that's kind of sobering.
Yeah. Interesting. All right, Xiao. I was about to end it, but Red Dwarf wants to know who would win, Liu Xiao or Mr. T. Do you know who Mr. T is?
I don't know who Mr. T is. Who's
I bet Mr. T pities the fool who doesn't know who Mr. T is. Mr. T was a pop culture icon in the U.S. He was this big black dude with a mohawk, and he always wore gold chains, and he appeared on a couple of TV shows like The A-Team, and he even had his own cartoon, Mr. T, and I don't remember the whole name, but he would also appear in like these public service announcements where he would tell kids not to do drugs and just other positive messages. And yeah, I think, yeah, he also appeared in Rocky 3 as the character Clubber Lang fighting, you know.
Oh, okay, I know Clubber Lang.
Okay, yes, that's Mr. T.
But what about him? Is he an actor?
He's an actor, but he was also a bodyguard. I think that's how he got discovered, because he was a bodyguard. I don't know how much he actually knew about fighting, but he was a large, physically imposing guy.
Okay.
He's the type of guy where you look at him and you're like, I'm not going to mess with that guy. He looks big and scary.
He's pretty buff.
Yeah. Mr. T, I love Mr. T, man. I would love to do a podcast with Mr. T. Mr. T, if you're watching, man, let's do a podcast, please. I'd love to talk to you. I got some questions from Mr. T. Interesting. Herv Vernon, I'm going to take this comment. It's not really a question. Herv Vernon says, Ramsey should honestly discuss Bruce Lee as an influencer in the martial arts scene from his time up to today.
I think you should.
That's the real thing.
You would
I
probably...
don't know why Rams keeps hinting a negative opinion. When have I hinted at a negative opinion about Bruce Lee?
You should discuss Bruce Lee himself as an influencer, not that you as an influencer should discuss Bruce Lee. Okay, I misunderstood his...
Oh, that we should discuss Bruce Lee as an influencer of martial arts
Nobody's
culture?
debating that.
Yeah, nobody's debating that. He was a massive influence on the culture. And what did we say that was negative about Bruce Lee? We were just singing accolades about Bruce Lee's acting ability just moments ago. What the heck, man? What podcast were you just listening to? Emiliano Flores says, why do you think there are more karate practitioners than kung fu? Are there? I don't know. If we're talking about in the United States or other English-speaking countries, there are definitely more karate practitioners than kung fu practitioners. In China, I don't know. I think the most popular... Actually, I know the most popular martial art here in China is Taekwondo. Taekwondo is the most widely practiced martial art in the world, by far.
Right.
World Taekwondo Federation style specifically. And largely because of China, because China is super excited about winning the Olympics, and so Taekwondo, it's an Olympic sport.
So because China has lots of people.
Yeah. It's also one of those Olympic sports where you don't have to go to a Olympic training facility or a sports university to train. Like
Right.
some sports you do. If you want to be a Sanda fighter in China, good luck if you don't get into a major sports university. It's hard to find anyone to teach you. But Taekwondo, you can take Taekwondo classes as a child at 1,000 different dojongs around China. Easy. It's just widely available. But karate, why is karate more popular in the U.S.? That's a good question. Here's one of the reasons. A huge percentage of karate schools in the United States, especially the southern U.S., Texas, that area of America, actually are Taekwondo classes in disguise. If your karate class has a lot of spin kicks, it's probably a Taekwondo class in disguise. If your karate class has a lot of high kicks, it was probably a taekwondo class in disguise. Here's the story. This is a story a lot of people don't know. There was a school called Kim's Karate. Kim was from Korea. Kim was a taekwondo master from Korea, came to America. His original intent was to teach taekwondo, his national martial art. Okay? He moved to Texas, I believe it was, and he opened up a taekwondo school, and it wasn't doing well. But Kim noticed something about Americans. He noticed that karate was just better known than taekwondo in America, and so he changed the name. Kim's Karate. It was alliterative. It stuck in the mind. And it became enormously popular. It became one of the most popular karate franchises in the United States. And guess what? It was all Taekwondo. It was Taekwondo by a different name because that's how Kim made his money. That's how he got people in the door. Called it karate, taught them Taekwondo.
Even in the Cobra Kai universe, isn't the Cobra Kai lineage a variation of Tang Soo Do?
Yeah, it's Tang Soo Do. But here's what... Tang Soo Do, you might not know this, but do you know how to say it in Chinese?
Tang Shou Dao.
Yes, Tang Shou Dao. What does that mean in Chinese?
Tang is the most influential dynasty
The Tang Dynasty?
of China. And
then Shou?
sometimes it's used as a reference for Chinese people in general.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So
it would
Chinese...
be something like the Chinese way of fighting.
Yeah.
Chinese
Tang
way
Shou
of
Dao.
hands.
Chinese hand way.
Yeah.
Literally.
Literally.
Or Tang Dynasty way. Right? That's what it means. Where else have we heard that? That was the original name of karate, or in Okinawa as it was originally called To Te Do.
Fist, foot way.
The To Te Do means it means Tang Dynasty hand way, Chinese hand way. That To Te Do was later renamed Karate Do, empty hand way. Why? To take the Chinese nationalism element out of it, to try to make it a purely Japanese martial art because of Japanese nationalism.
Mr. Miyagi's ancestor got karate from China, didn't you hear?
Yeah, and Mr. Miyagi even tells this story in The Karate Kid.
One day,
Like, where did you learn
Saki,
karate
strong
from,
wind.
Mr. Miyagi? I learned it from my father, right? And where did your father learn it from? And let me tell you about the... And Mr. Miyagi tells him a little bit. It means Chinese hand. Originally, that's what it meant. And karate now means empty hand. And again, they changed it for purposes of nationalism. Now, before the name change, when karate was still called To Te Do, or in Chinese, Tang Shou Dao, or in Korean, Tang Soo Do, okay? They all mean the exact same thing. They mean karate, the old name of karate. Okay? When was it? The 1950s or so, there was a Japanese occupation of Korea. And they brought Shotokan karate specifically, Shotokan karate to Korea. And the founders of Taekwondo, the founders of Tang Soo Do, all these other founders of these Korean martial arts were masters of Shotokan, and they taught Shotokan. Tang Soo Do was the original Korean name for Shotokan karate. It's just Korean for karate. That's literally what it means, before the name change. That's it. That is why Tang Soo Do looks so much like Shotokan. That's why the forms have the exact same movements and just in slightly different orders.
At the end of the day, kickboxing is kickboxing, striking is striking.
Yep.
Each person does it his own way. I don't get why people are still so obsessed with styles.
It's historical reenactments is what it is. It's the same obsession that historical European martial arts, the HEMA guys, that they're so fascinated by. Why do they collect swords? Because it's cool, because it's fun. Because it's fun to learn history. Like, this is the history of the English longsword. Let me bore you with it for 3 hours.
Weapon fighting could also easily be practiced.
Yeah, it could be, and some people do. Like the Society of Historical Fencing, it's a great YouTube channel. They fence all the time with blunted weapons. It's great. It's awesome.
Just get some pool noodles.
Or you could do it with pool noodles. We've done that in the gym. We spar with pool noodles for swords and punching mitts for shields. Yeah.
Captain America
yes,
shield.
Kenyu with his Captain America shield, exactly in that
You
video.
with the pad.
Yeah. And that's a lot of fun, and it can teach you a lot about boxing skills. But most people, what do? They just collect swords. and they take him out, wave him around once in a while. Maybe they'll chop a watermelon in half for fun. But most people aren't sword fighting. And it's the same thing with a lot of traditional martial arts. People do it because it's fun. It's fun to have that historical reenactment, to connect with the past, to get a snapshot into what your ancestors might have been doing or somebody else's ancestors might have been doing once upon a time. It's interesting.
Yeah, there's value in that. If they enjoy it, why not? Just, I hope they don't be delusional about it. But if they are, it's none of my business.
Yeah. All right. Let's bring this podcast to a close. Hey, thanks for your questions. Thanks for watching, everybody. Xiao, any closing remarks for our viewers?
Well, I'm flying to America tomorrow. Thank you to all of the fans who followed my journey on Ramsey's channel, who've showed me love and support. I appreciate all of you. And Ramsey, thank you for being my coach for the past 2.5 years.
Absolutely, man. Indeed. Safe travels, my friend. And thank you for watching. Now get out there and train.